Okay, presumably the camera goes on after that. All right. March 15th meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee will come to order. We have a lengthy agenda tonight and a lot of distinguished company, so I don't want to spend too much time on details. We also have a substitute recording secretary who is not as familiar with all of us as the regular one is, so if she from time to time wants a repeat or wants something clarified, we're going to give her the chance to do that. Okay, first item on the agenda is Andrew Gottlieb, who is the director of the Cape Cod Water Collaborative, who is knowledgeable on a whole series of subjects that have been in front of this committee and the prior committee, and we're very happy that you could take the time to share with us what you know, because a lot of these things we've kind of run into stone walls as far as our own being able to figure them out, and we welcome your input and we appreciate your presence.
That seems to have stopped doing what it
In
was
no
supposed to
particular
do.
order, but in the order that we have on the agenda, the 0 interest loan requirements that the state has include a land use bylaw, which we have, various members have looked at and struggled with and tried to ascertain exactly how practical it would be for Falmouth to do it. And I think whether we want to start with the questions or start with a short presentation, since you were instrumental in creating this this law. And,
Well, I can just give you an overview of what's in the statute and then some of the DEP regs and some of the thinking behind it a little bit, and
Yeah.
jump into any sort of questions you might have. You know, there were 5 criteria in the legislation that created the 0 interest option, one of them being the towns implement measures to essentially hold allowable flows constant, and when you compare pre-implementation of your wastewater management solution to your chosen alternative. So that if you're doing, so that if you're looking, and the idea behind it is that that you shouldn't be using the additional incremental state assistance to increase your wastewater flows. That the purpose behind the additional incentive was to create effectively some rate relief for communities, provide a lower cost of borrowing than the normal program would, and in exchange for that incremental financial assistance, you take the necessary steps to ensure that after you implement, whether it's a sewering project or you know, non-structural alternatives that you chose to finance through the SRF, that you didn't have an increase in flow. It was really structured, to be perfectly honest, around as a way of blunting the most commonly perceived problems with sewering. That, you know, once you take Title V limits off, a lot of towns use Title V as a sort of de facto or stealth method of zoning control. So the zoning might say X number of units per acre, but everybody kind of knows you're never going to get that much because Title V limits it, but you don't have to have the fight on town meeting floor about the zoning. So, you know, when you end up with sewering, Title V goes away, and what your zoning says can actually happen. And that can result in a significant increase in the number of bedrooms or a significant increase in commercial flows that are allowed, and that can undercut what you chose to do with your implementation strategy by increasing the flows and either using capacity above and beyond what you were designed for, and leaving you unable to treat those areas that you'd intended to, or allowing growth in other areas that may or may not be included in your collection system in the near term, and just basically undermining what you were doing through the treatment alternative. So the idea here was to condition the money on not letting that happen. And the statute speaks to it in rather broad terms. You don't have to control through zoning. You can control through a zoning change. You can control through a Board of Health rule. You can control through sewer use regulation, be the 3 prime, or a general town bylaw. It's not prescriptive in that regard, so you know, different towns approach it in different ways, and it's intended to allow that to happen. The statute requires that the town applying for the zero interest loan, get the approval of DEP, of the land use control method, whatever it might be, and that they do so in consultation with Department of Housing and Community Development. You know, DEP doesn't know the housing land use side in a way that DHCD does. DHCD doesn't really want anything to do with trying to figure out environmental or wastewater flows. So there was a set of regulations that just got promulgated back in January that tried to put some detail around that process. And, you know, Virginia wrote a very nice summary. She's right, it is very dense reading. To try and skinny it down a little bit, the idea here is, you know, you apply for your zero interest, and then you have a component of your package that would include discussion of the land use piece. That piece goes over to DHCD. And there's two methods that are prescribed in the regs. And we structured it this way, sort of one sort of presumptive method, so that if you do the math the way the state says to do the math and your calculations add up, you get approval. You know, it's a presumptive methodology that makes certain assumptions about bedrooms per acre, flows, and the like. And it's intended to be a more straightforward, less subjective approach that would allow a town to get in and get out, basically, as long as their math is right. And the method they chose to achieve the restriction is something that's known to work in Massachusetts. For example, if somebody picks a method that either hasn't been approved by the Attorney General's office, or we've seen, you know, just hasn't worked. You know, one in particular, maybe a transfer development rights type approach, where you can do it, it's on the books in Massachusetts. It hasn't worked real well. And that's the, sort of the crux of a town strategy. Then, you know, you look at that and say, you know, maybe not. The second method is to account for sort of the phenomena of everybody thinking they're special. You know, your baseline approach doesn't work for me. Let me tell you the 5 reasons why my town's different. And the second method lets any town make that argument. And is much less constraining in the boundaries of what information you have to provide and how you sort of explain it, but it's also much less certain about what the outcome might be, because you get into a subjective discussion. You know, people would say, well, you know, wastewater flows in my town, you know, you might say that, you know, it's X gallons per bedroom, but we have metered water records, for example, that show that our actual use is so much less. And as a result of that, you know, our baseline, or so much higher. As a result of that, our baseline ought to be higher. And it lets any town that wants to make, frankly, whatever argument it wants about what their baseline should be, how it should be calculated, and then to make the case that the land use limits they put in place will result in net, no change. So there's less certainty in that approach, but there's also more variability and you have more options. So we talked about structuring it that way so the towns would have the choice. Make the argument on why they're unique, take the standards the way they are, sort of the cookie cutter approach, run it through the system, see what the math adds up to, and that's what your flow is. So the idea is that in the entire area that contributes nitrogen to a particular water body you're trying to control, you would be expected to impose those limits so that in the aggregate, the flows pre-management and post-management would be the same. How you allocate those flows within that portion of the watershed, there's not a word about that in the statute. So there's nothing in here that tells a town how it needs to allocate those flows. So you get to pick, through the method you choose, the winners and losers. Okay, you can do a proportional change that affects everybody the same, doesn't matter where you are in the watershed. You can do a change that would say, you know, we're going to do some infrastructure in this portion of the community in the watershed. This is where we think, because we're putting infrastructure in, there ought to be an increase in density. And we want to see less additional development in the areas that are not being subject to management, either over the short term or the long term. You can make those decisions. This legislation, DEP and DHCD, don't care, if you will, from that perspective. So what you need to think about and look at is the whole watershed that's subject to whatever management alternatives you decide to put in place. That's the area whose land land management needs to be altered to result in a no net increase in flow. Then how you allocate that, entirely up to you.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, I said questions from the eager questions from the committee, starting with Virginia.
Okay. I read this through carefully because I wanted to see if the town could even do it and to try to understand it. The first thing that jumped out at me is that the basic calculation, whether you use the first method, presumptive, or the second method, is based on the same data. It's not different data. It's all actual flow data for parcels that are already developed, and it is comparable data, taking an undeveloped parcel, if it's an undeveloped residential, you calculate it based on another undeveloped developed residential. So you're really starting with the same database. Your second method allows you to do more, let's call it projection, or thinking, well, we might redevelop this area and we might have more intense housing someplace. So you may ultimately end up with a slightly higher number under the second method than the first. But we have, before you, even just starting with your presumptive, supposedly cookie cutter approach, we have a major issue. And that is that all of these peninsulas that are shown up here in color, that are almost completely developed, are nearly 50% summer. So that the actual water flows that we're supposed to use are actually going to underreport what the flow will be if those houses become year-round. And so I'd like your reaction to that first, and then I have some other questions.
Well, I would use, in that type of instance, depends what your objective is. If your objective is to bump the baseline up as much as you can, then you'd want to use the second methodology.
Anyway.
And make the case about why, given this development pattern, where you are, what you're seeing, the rate of seasonality, some projections about what you see as a conversion rate being, so that you get credit, if you will. Not that I'm recommending that you try and push your baseline higher, but that you could make the argument that your baseline, because it's allowed under Title V, you've got
Right.
You've got these, you've got homes with certain number of bedrooms, and the allowable flow could be X above what the actuals are. You could make that argument that that is what is currently authorized under Title V, and it is. I mean, nothing about Title V limits this conversion of that seasonality, so you can get that flow out of those.
Okay.
So you'd be able to make that argument under Method 2. You wouldn't be able to make that argument under Method 1.
Under Method 1.
That's a strategic
decision
that the town would want to
Okay,
make in terms
that's
of
a
what
good point.
outcome you want to foster.
All right. Now, if we're applying for a 0% loan, but we're only intending to sewer a small portion of this colored area, and we're going to wait and see what the demonstration projects show us on the other, will we be submitting the analysis only for the watersheds that we're thinking of sewering?
You'd be submitting the analysis of the entire watershed of any portion of that watershed you're trying to sewer.
Okay, but we would not have to submit the analysis for the ones farther east if we're not intending to sewer those at the time we're applying for this particular loan. Do you understand my question?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And it wouldn't just be, it would be for any eligible project.
Okay. All right. I'll pass to somebody else for a minute.
Jerry?
You said an interesting thing, which it'd be nice if we could do it, but the TMDL, we're going in and doing a CWMP for all the watersheds. So whether or not we think we can afford to do the rest of the watersheds and how to do the rest of the watersheds, so we could get an approval for CWMP, and then we're going to get conditional approval for the 0% loans as we go for SRS eligible projects in each watershed. So we start off at Little Pond, and if that's sewering or if it's anything eligible, then we have to do the analysis then. If 20 years later or 10 years later we decide to do something in the next watershed, that's the time, because that's the time we're going to be applying for the financing, that we have to come in and do the analysis. The problem's gonna be, if we wanna do the whole town, I would think, we may not want to have each watershed with its own individual land use sets. You know, zoning for Little Pond, or water use for Little Pond, then we go to Great Pond, or Green Pond. You know, we don't have a uniform approach.
I mean,
but we
that's,
could do it.
you could do it. I mean, it works best if you're looking at everything at once. And because, you know, if you're moving, to the extent you're moving growth around town, you know, so let's say you put in something that's perceived as restrictive in the watershed you're applying for a project financing for, and then, you know, the zoning is perceived to be less restrictive in an adjacent watershed that may have a nitrogen loading problem, but you haven't gotten to it yet, so you haven't layered the land use controls over that. You know, one could make the argument that you're just pushing the problem over to the next adjacent watershed and increasing the load there that you're then gonna have to deal with later on. So arguably, you know, you'd want to do as much and as broad a land use management across as much of the town as you think you can manage, so that you're not just pushing, you know, squeezing the balloon and having it bulge out somewhere else.
We're not squeezing the balloon because this is practically at build-out already. So it is just about what it is.
That's not the case for every town. that's
Well,
dealing
I
with
understand, but as I said, we looked at these
Yeah.
to see, is it possible for Falmouth to actually file for this? Does it make any sense for us to file for this? These regulations don't give us any suggestions, just as you said, as to what the actual land use control will be. And that's the big elephant in the room, that has to be approved by either town meeting or the Board of Health. And we're nowhere near agreeing on what that control will be. To apply the control to the entire colored area, when in fact there's a strong sense in the town that we're not going to sewer that whole area, is just, you know, just sort of asking for failure of the control. So we really do need to develop a focus plan on a watershed that we would sewer, and then we would look at the land controls for that sewering.
Right. I mean, we wrote them in a way that, you know, is as flexible as possible to meet any individual town's circumstance, and to be as non-prescriptive on the methodology and the strategy that you apply as possible. But, you know, that creates, you know, some flexibility that also can be a little confounding at times, you know.
Yep.
And we've had towns that have done, you know, talked about doing zoning, and we've had towns that have done it through Board of Health rule.
Right, okay.
Steve?
Andrew, I appreciate that when you started off, you noted that each town's going to come to you and tell you, or come to whomever and say, but our town is unique. And I would offer that one of the unique things for Falmouth is we have a couple of portions of town that have been sewered for quite an extensive period of time. So statistically, we could go look at those areas and ascertain what the average water use is based upon building size, lot size, or usage, and sort it out by year-round versus seasonality to see what the baseline is for those areas. We could then take and compare those numbers to the areas that we are proposing to do anything into, to see
if they-
how much difference there is in an area that's already sewered versus not. And even further push it, we have an area, Eel Pond, if you will, that's been sewered for quite some time. So it's very old, very established usage. We have an area on Surf Drive that's all residential, is built out. Probably you can look at, even though the buildings might have changed, and the dollar value, the tax base, if you will, for that property has changed, that not knowing what the answer is, we should see how much change in water usage occurred in exchange for the change in property value over time. And then we have an area that we recently put another sewer into that, again, is very seasonal up in New Silver Beach, where there's water usage from the recent past. We can look at now for the last couple of years, we're into year 3, Jerry?
Yeah.
Year 3. So we've got so we can build some data sets to look at all of that. If we do that work and we don't see, because the underlying premise is you do something in an area, people will immediately start developing land and increasing the water usage. I would contend that might be true to a very measurable extent in an area where there's a lot of developable land, or there are large lots that people can expand their property on. But the bulk of some of these lots in one of these areas are so small that the zoning setback precludes you almost from doing anything. You know, at most, you might be able to put another bedroom in, and again, under seasonal usage, I'm not so sure that the water usage will change, okay? So part of, I think, when I went off at the last meeting about this is, we could use up a lot of political and sort of what I would call community
Goodwill.
or things towards making the estuaries better in what could become a very divisive exercise that we might not, at the end of the day, be achieving anything out of. Even when we put it in place, it might not change what would happen if we didn't have it.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to do some basic work on what we know already for out of flow numbers before we make a hard decision on
Well,
this.
let me make, maybe at the risk of making the picture even cloudier, let me try and respond to that in the sense that,
Let me finish with my last thing.
Okay.
And so, and thinking about that, if we were to turn around, and Jerry's gonna kill me when I say this, but what if we said, average home uses X gallon of water per year based on our analysis of this whole thing here, and we're gonna build a water rate system that says if an individual homeowner uses water over a certain point, that rate will start to climb exponentially so that you discourage them from using more water through a rate structure, not a bylaw. People can do whatever they want to in their home as long as they keep their water usage down at that point, or pay the price. I mean, if
So it's not
if
a-
water's costing me
Water
a
has to
couple of pennies a gallon, but I go over a certain point, it's gonna start costing what it costs to buy bottled water, I won't use over that water.
well, I mean, we chose intentionally flow as the metric that's being measured here. Because, you know, you could measure it and you have different methods of trying to calculate and address it. If you propose a, you know, escalating block rate water structure, water sewer use structure that, you know, you thought was sufficient to discourage people from redeveloping or adding on once Title V was no longer a relevant restriction, and you could make the case that that was going to achieve the outcome of keeping things neutral, you could make that case. And again, you're not making it to me. You know, you're making it to DEP. So you know, I can sort of tell you what we thought about when we were drafting legislation and what we were counseling when we were assisted in the development of the regulations. So where they come down later on policy stuff, you know, I can't do it. My speculation is no better than yours. Let's put it that way. So I don't know how that would play out. But what I was going to say in response to your first question is, you know, people focus on the legislation and the zero interest piece, but there was an entire another segment to it, which was the creation of a local option general statute that had with it a series of additional powers and abilities, including the ability to extend the term of borrowing beyond the conventional 30-year limits to the useful life of the asset that you're financing. And it provides an approach. If you look at it there's a couple ways to look at affordability and cost. You know, one perfectly legitimate way to look at this is to lower the per capita impact of whatever management structure you put in place to deal with your nitrogen. One way of doing that is lowering the cost of money, which you do through the zero interest piece, which comes with it this limitation. Another way to do it is to extend the term over which you're borrowing so that even though in the aggregate over a 40 or 50 year period, you're paying more in total principal and interest, but you know, when you extend a longer term mortgage, the annual operating cost goes down. And the rate impact of that could be equal to or greater than the impact of taking the zero interest and not get into the
Andrew,
land use space.
I don't want to get off onto a tangent here. We're aware of that piece, and it's a subject all by itself.
Okay.
But the one we're on now is the zero interest. I want to stick with that if we can. Any other comments or questions from the committee, and then we'll get to.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Just backing up, that most people think the 0% is for sewer projects, but if we ended up funding Clevis Multrums or any of the non-sewer projects with SRF funds, then you still would need a land use control. And the ironic thing is, and don't throw anything at me, if you start putting Clevis Multrums in and things like that, and your water use goes down, you may be a compost toilets, excuse me, you may be able to increase the density now because your flow is so much less. I personally think all those arguments don't jive because there's only so many square feet you can put on a 5,000 square foot lot. But it gets interesting when you start looking, is this growth management, and the people that want to maximize the density of a unit might now say, gee whiz, with a compost toilet or something else, I can increase density.
See, as I said, the term of art we chose was flow, not density.
Right.
And not growth. This is not, it was specifically and intentionally not intended to be a growth tool. It's a flow tool, because the thing that the watershed cares about from this perspective is the amount of nitrogen you're getting, not the upland densities. And obviously there's a relationship between the two, but it was a lot of thought that went into, what's the toggle that you're playing with here? And the toggle you're playing with here is flow, and there's a lot of different ways to play the flow game.
But a lot of people
Steve wants to say something.
were concerned that the sewers cause increased density and the flow was just a way of translating it. If the underlying concern is you don't want to overdevelop an area, it's just, and I understand what you're saying. And we did, the other thing I wanted to get back on Steve was that we already have a very conservative water rate in that every gallon someone uses for water, they pay for wastewater. So when they're watering their lawn, they're paying a premium. They shower outside, they're paying a premium. So we probably have a fairly restrictive use, and you could go higher. The selectmen always argue, should we have a sliding scale?
Got it. Steve?
Just a naive zoning question. Are we only concerned with increased single detached houses? Or is there the potential of commercial apartments, hotels built into residential areas, such as further east on the Cape? I mean, do we have to worry about that?
I think the answer is yes. We have to worry about every single parcel. All the parcels that are not zoned residential get treated somewhat differently in terms of calculating what their benchmark flow is. But they're commercial, and they could be absolutely any kind of commercial you can conceive or not conceive.
Yeah. I mean, my advice to you is read what your zoning says, because without Title V, your zoning is what you can get. With Title V, you get something, you get zoning minus something under Title V right now. If Title V is gone, you get what your zoning says, and you may not like it.
And in the commercial areas, you could have things that are highly water usage, or you could have something that's
Right.
clothing and doesn't.
Or you could have a storage facility that does
Yes,
nothing.
Exactly.
that doesn't
Right.
generate anything. Can I make just one clarification? I want to make absolutely sure. The SRF fund, if we go for the 2%, not the 0%, will fund inlet widening.
The SRF, through the non-point source
Right.
component, will fund a variety of projects. And I think there's room within the wording that you could do things, all the
Inlet widening.
inlet widening,
Permeable
barriers,
reactive
yeah.
barriers, composting toilets.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean,
Good.
composting toilet, you gotta think
Okay.
about who the owner is, though. The project proponent, because the town is the borrower. Okay, so when
that's a
you
good
get
point.
to,
Yeah.
when you get to doing things that puts capital value into people's homes,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta think through the relationship, because the homeowner ain't gonna become the borrower.
Okay.
If you wanted to do it that way,
Yeah.
the off-ramp for you would be the septic betterment program, which
okay.
is managed, it's an SRF piece. It uses state-only money, so it doesn't have some of the restrictions of the federal government on it, and it's run through the county. And you can pay for, that provides, the subsidized loan on a household-by-household basis, where the borrowing entity is the homeowner
Okay.
with a relationship through the county. Okay?
Okay.
But if you're gonna borrow, you can't, because of constitutional limitation on pledging the full faith and credit of the Commonwealth to private entities, in particular homeowners, homeowner can't be an eligible borrower under the main SRF program because of the way the bond proceeds are used to leverage money. So just, it's a new, so yes, it's eligible. you have to think
Different
about how
pathway.
the money flow is gonna work to make that happen, if you're gonna do that on a big basis.
One final point on this issue, because you got a couple more here. Other towns on the Cape, have any of them tackled this? Have any of them brought it to their town meetings or the Board of Health? And where is everybody else?
For
Chatham used a Board of Health rule.
But they didn't go for 0%?
Yeah, they are, they're in process, they're the only ones who are gonna go for it at this point.
Oh, in process.
They voted their project prior to the spring before the summer that this thing passed. So they've kind of been playing catch-up and waiting for the rules to get solidified, and so we've been using some interim financing techniques to keep their project from being permanently bonded. So they're in the process now of actually going through this regulatory review. Orleans did a Board of Health rule. They don't have any capital facilities authorized yet, so they haven't gone through this process because they have no eligible project for which they're borrowing at this point.
Right.
Trying to think.
Nate's got an observation. I think you did Chatham, right?
Yeah, it's got to do with Chatham. It's actually a sewer use regulation.
Nate, you might want to speak to a microphone.
Talking to my caller.
There's one next to the secretary.
One right there.
Regarding Chatham, they passed a sewer use regulation which had the goal of stating that the growth you can get right now, before the CWMP was passed, would be the growth that you could have afterwards. And tried to craft a regulation which is fairly simple, but stating that basic premise. And that premise was put out there to be able to allay the fear that once a sewer goes in, you would have uncontrolled growth. And so that, because there was a fear out there, it was decided that regulation had to go forward. It did pass at town meeting, and it's on the books. When the town was ready to move forward with its SRF loan application, or with its SRF project evaluation form, it submitted it in calendar year 2009, which was the first year that was eligible in that 10-year window for the 0%. And there were statements in there of how the town met the 5 criterion. DEP didn't review and address the 5 criterion because they didn't have any regulations on their books at that time, and DEP did not know how to address it. So they told the town, wait, and don't engage in any long-term borrowing, just go with short-term borrowing until we get the regulations passed and out. Regulations were passed and came out in January, and now the town is working to develop the paperwork which involves an addendum application to the original SRF loan, which documents how their project meets those 5 criteria. And that's something that the town hopes to have completed and submitted in a month or 2.
Great.
Could I ask one question on the 5 criteria?
Nate?
Is, one of the 5 criteria is that it be coordinated with a regional water resource management plan, if it exists. Does one exist on the Cape?
No, it does not.
No.
And the way that Chatham documented that it is in compliance with any kind of regional entity is that it demonstrated that it had an approval from the Cape Cod Commission Development of Regional Impact, DRI process.
Okay.
Fine.
Erica, I
Yeah,
have a
Matt.
question. And it's a little bit off base, but maybe not much. Did checkerboarding ever get into the legislation?
There's checkerboarding in the local option statute.
So that's something we could do. In other words, the question is if
You better
we-
explain what checkerboarding is for.
Checkerboarding means that some people would be exempt from connecting to the sewer line, even if they're on it. I think it's a local option, the town would have to vote to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that local option statute works is you take it all, you take none of it. And there is provision in there, there's a couple sections that give towns enhanced authority. an ability to both checkerboard, in other words, identify those parcels that must connect to the sewer and those parcels that either don't have to or wouldn't be allowed to, based on what your nitrogen control strategy was intended to
And
be.
here's where that would come in. For the demonstration project, if we do get 60 people or however number of people who agree to put in composting toilets, as a further incentive, we want to tell them that if the town does in the end decide to go with sewers, you will not be forced to connect. You can, if you desire, you can keep your composting toilet if you want it. So that might be eligible. That might be something we can do underneath
Yeah,
this.
I mean, you can either adopt the local option statute, or you can pursue special legislation giving you that ability individually. The idea behind doing a local option was to preclude the need for towns to go piecemeal,
Sure.
every time they want to do something a little different in this regard, to the legislature to get the authority to do it.
Okay, Jerry?
It's just a small thing when you got back to how the state would perceive regulatory controls. I think in the past, most people would say sewers might have induced growth. With the permits we're seeing now, I would probably assert that there's going to be more flow control for people within the sewer system because it's going to be tightly regulated. I mean, Falmouth permit has that the state might have to look at every new connection we put in or something like that.
Yeah, but-
And with the Title V outside the sewer area, you might have to have equal growth control to ensure, and that could be a strong Board of Health.
Maybe, but just because you get a permit that says flow is limited to X, you still have to do something to make that happen.
Oh, of course.
So,
Sure.
just those permits don't come with any additional authority that lets you do anything. You still have to fight that fight locally and figure out how you're gonna manage that. One
Yes.
more word on, just on the timing of all this.
Yes.
The idea, now that we're sort of prospective, we've got, Chatham sort of cleaned up in there in the process, and the only other Cape project that was approved before the statute was passed, or appeared on the list, were the Stewart's Creek and Waquacket projects in Barnstable. Waquacket went down to a fiery defeat. Stewart's Creek is being built. I don't think there's any interest in Barnstable in doing anything on the land use side, so I think they're just gonna go with the standard 2% loan. So what came out of that was, it only really matters whether the town has the approval on the 0% when the project goes out for permanent financing, which is typically after it's under construction, whatever the thing is. Typically, you get approved, you get an interim loan that gets you going, that you pay almost 0% on the interim loans. It's nominal, it's under 1%. And then when they get enough interim financing packages together to go to the bond market and it's deemed that it's appropriate time, that's when those get converted out into permanent loans. So Chatham is able to go ahead because they've been on interim financing longer than they normally would have been. We held them out of any pool financing until this got resolved. So this conversation has been allowed to drag out over a long period of time. So the absolute, no matter what the kind of the rules sort of imply, the absolute deadline for making a determination is when your project goes to permanent financing, which is typically 18 months after you appear on the list.
So you're saying we have more time than.
You have more time, but the regs kind of signal that you like, on a prospective basis, if you were to come in next year for a project and you say we got zero interest, that you'd be able to describe what your plan is and how you plan to implement it. Whether you've actually gone to town meeting or not, you're waiting. Some towns may choose to go to town meeting and get the approval because they think it puts them in a more competitive position statewide to access the money, so they can go to the state and say, we've already done this stuff. We got your certification, put us on the list. Other towns may say, we want to go to town meeting and say, we're not going to do these things until and unless we get put on the list, and then you go back afterwards. So you can play it either way. Again, it's a strategic decision that you'd make about what's best to allow your project to proceed most expeditiously through town meeting process. But the drop dead date, there's some vagueness in here. The actual drop dead date is when you get permanently financed, which is long after you're on the list.
The question of a model bylaw
Yep.
for fertilizer and for this, are either one of those being thought about or prepared by
Being
anybody?
thought about, I thought about the problem with doing sort of a model for this is that everybody's zoning is so different. I'm not sure that a model wouldn't be so broad as to have little value when you got to the specifics about looking at your particular zoning. I mean, what we can offer between myself and the commission staff is we'll sit down and work with you in interpreting this to your particular case and help you work out a proposal. Because, you know, these regs were developed with a lot of input from both us and the commission. So I think we have pretty good insights on the detail level about how to navigate them and answer specific questions. I think that's frankly a better use and a more valuable service than a model bylaw, because I think the model would be, I just don't see it being that much value. It might move you from here to here, but it won't move you from the beginning to the end in a way that's that meaningful. The lawn side, we could do one. I think that's less, I think there's less variability there.
Lawn fertilizer.
Lawn fertilizer, I don't think it's
Fertilizer,
that
Yeah.
complicated.
Matt,
I just want to ask if Andy's familiar with the bill that just got reported out of Natural Resources,
oh, yeah, oh, good question.
that
Yeah.
apparently
Oh, is this the one
eliminates
that puts state control,
Yeah.
gives it to
For fertilizer.
DAR
Fertilizer.
on fertilizer? Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
what are any chances of that moving through, do you know? or
You know, what
you've
I've
tracked
heard
it?
is that if anything's gonna move, that's the one that's gonna move. There's a lot of, that's the one, if anything's gonna go. That's what I've heard.
Could you explain it?
It basically preempts local control on fertilizer
Yeah,
control.
it would have a state description of what you can do, and the locals would have no option on that.
Right.
Does the governor, do you know, have a
I
position on
don't
this?
know.
Because,
I heard,
That preemption?
huh?
Who's?
Department of Food and what are they now?
Natural,
Agricultural
Agriculture?
Resources?
DAR.
DAR.
They're submitting it?
I don't think they submitted it, but I think they support
to
it.
support it, yeah.
I got kind of an alarm phone call from a couple of environmental advocates saying, you know about this? Now this is playing the cake.
Well, that's what we have for pesticides. It was
Right.
passed in the
Well,
80s.
well, it's the same thing.
Similar model.
For
Similar model,
fertilizer.
because the applicators and the like don't want patchwork regulatory oversight.
Right, good point. For the, in the interest of the recording secretary, if people could identify themselves,
Eileen Gunn.
thank you.
And the other one is all questions should come through the chair, so we avoid getting
sorry.
Right.
cross, no problem to have the comments, just so we don't get cross.
Right,
cross-debate going on.
and through a microphone so that the world can hear you as
Nah, I
well.
think it's something to worry about,
Okay.
is the sense I get. I haven't spent a
Right.
lot of time on it, but that's the vibe I got.
Right.
I've seen the information.
If it came out of that committee, that's a bad sign.
Rachel Jakuba from the Buzzards Bay Coalition.
Beautiful.
And in terms of that, the fertilizer bill, it's something that we're concerned with as well. And we've been speaking to Mass Audubon, and they've proposed alternate language that would keep the regulation of fertilizer with DAR, but it would exempt all non-agricultural fertilizer control at the local level. So you could still do lawn fertilizer bylaws on a local level, but not agricultural fertilizer. And that's something that we're preparing a letter to Representative Brewer saying that we're in support of that, of the bill with that alternative language.
I mean,
Brewer's bill, isn't it?
Senator
Senator
Brewer.
Brewer. I
Senator
believe it's
Brewer, sorry.
I believe
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that he's the
And
lead
he's-
sponsor in the Senate.
He's chair of Ways and
Ways and
Means.
Means.
Right, right, so it's got a good chance over there.
I think it would include golf courses, yeah, because that's not agriculture, so, yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. That would be a good fallback position, I guess, but we all ought to pay some attention to this.
Could you make sure that we get a copy of the
Sure.
amendment
Sure.
proposal?
Great. Virginia?
On the 0% loan, you currently have 300 million that's authorized each year?
Well,
Roughly.
roughly.
My question is, is that pot gonna increase if some? No, that's it. So if someone goes for a 0% loan, they're in a sense getting not only the 2% break, but they're getting an additional 2% break. So that means it makes the situation more competitive, because
Well, yeah.
they're eating a larger piece of the pie.
Well, it's not structured as a set aside, so there's not a, the way it's worded is, up to a third of the amount of money that's being put out for loans every year can go at zero.
I understand.
There's not so if it's a $300 million pool, there's not a $100 million pool. There's $300 million list.
Okay.
And, if enough projects qualify, make that list on their own merit and qualify for zero, up to $100 million of the eligible projects would get financed at zero, if there's a project that was eligible to get financed at zero, but it was the $110th million, that $10 million increment would go at 2%.
Right, okay, I understand.
Quick question before we get into the Regional Wastewater Authority question is the inlet widening question. We did our part, I think. Did the town manager finally sign it and send it out?
He finally signed it, and Hosley Witten, I think it went out last week. There was some other things.
I got a
Okay.
copy of the filing today in the mail.
So what happens next? Where do we stand? What's the time frame on all of that?
I don't remember how long MEPA has, they have 90 days or something, so they're gonna convene, a little advisory committee to talk about the issue. We've been led to believe it'll get expedited and done fairly quickly, and we're not, as I sit here today, I'm not expecting an E&F requirement. I mean, an EIR requirement.
Well, that would be terrific, obviously.
That's the expectation at this point.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on 0% loans, fertilizer, inlet widening? If not,
Clarification, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. Every year, there was so much that could be set aside for 0%. If the state doesn't allocate it in a particular year, it doesn't roll over
no.
to the next year, is that correct?
That's right.
So, you use it or lose it, it doesn't build up.
well, conceptually, they could allocate it in no year. There's no requirement that it be allocated.
But it can't be any more than that.
But we got.
You can't add to it, you didn't use it this year,
No,
so
we-
next year you have twice as much.
No worry about that. Okay. Regional Wastewater Authority.
What about it?
What do you have in mind? Where does that leave us?
I've been talking about this a lot this week. Let me just tell you sort of where we are and what the thinking is. Number of things happened over the last 5 weeks that led to a vote by the county commissioners that I'll describe in a minute. Legislative delegation wrote a letter, or an op-ed piece in the Cape Times 5-6 weeks ago, voicing some support for a regional approach to dealing with wastewater. Town Managers Association came out with a somewhat more specific statement in support from their membership for that same concept. The special commission that former Senators Rauschenbach and O'Leary were chairing bandied around the idea over a couple of meetings, over a 4 or 5 week period, that resulted in them as a group voting unanimously to recommend to the county commissioners that as staff, Paul Niedzwiecki and I, begin a process by which we'd evaluate the merits of a regionalized authority to deal with wastewater, and to do an assessment of the merits of that and provide them with a recommendation by the end of the year on whether or not that made sense. To the extent that we determined it made sense, that we would also, as a component of the recommendation, provide them with recommended legislative language that if they chose to adopt, they would ask the delegation to file on their behalf. So what we've been authorized to do and directed to do is think about the issue and think about it in a public process that we're supposed to use and began yesterday with the board meeting, the Cape Water Protection Collaborative, use them as a sounding board and as a advisory body that would fully involve some public discussion and input. So what we talked about yesterday was a multi-tiered approach at getting public input and conducting this process openly and publicly. First, Paul and I, in some combination, sometimes together and sometimes separately, are going to go and meet with each one of the 15 boards of selectmen in the next, as soon as we can get on their agenda. So I would say, practical terms, over the next 6 weeks. Try and get some input, from those boards. We're also going to conduct a series of public forums, the first of which won't be to hear a reaction to any specific proposal, but just to have some open public meetings where people can come and say what they think about the idea. It'll be a little bit on the unstructured side, but we were sensitive to the fact of getting some input from people, before anything started to gel and before we asked them to react to any specific analyses or proposals. We're going to use the monthly meetings of the steering committee of the Water Protection Collaborative to have sort of issue-based discussions that will be open meetings, and we'll be doing some analysis on costs and benefits and potential structures, and talk about some of those issues in that forum and use them as a sounding board. And then at appropriate times during the process, when we have things for people to react to, we'll hold some open meetings and make some proposals or present some analysis and get some commentary on it. We're supposed to go back to the commissioners on a quarterly basis to update them on progress and thinking. And my understanding of what I've been asked to do is do a comparison between the approach that's currently being undertaken on a town-by-town basis, and we've got empirical and subjective views on the experience that towns have had. We've got a number of examples where, or a few examples anyway, Barnstable and Chatham in particular, where projects have moved forward. We have some sense of what the cost implications are, both to the town and to the individual ratepayer. We've got several examples of towns that have put projects forward that have not gotten voter support, primarily over cost and equity of cost distribution. So we've got sort of a current state of affairs, and what we're being asked to do is look at an alternative structure and assess whether it has any benefit from a cost management perspective, from an efficiency perspective, operating costs, the ability to look at alternative approaches so that you're minimizing the amount of infrastructure you're building, whether you can get an environmental outcome more quickly at lower cost, and to develop some analysis that can provide as much of an objective and empirical assessment of what that structure would look like and what it would yield, and then compare it to what we currently do, and have a discussion openly about whether or not one's better than the other. And if one is better than the other, presumably if we're rational, we'll choose that path. Or we may say, you know what, you might save 5 to 10% overall Cape-wide on a regional authority, but it's at the expense of, or perceived expense of local control. We'd rather pay that premium and do it ourselves. Fine. I don't, in a sense, if we had that discussion, that's what people chose, then I don't care. As long as we can get something done. So we're being asked to look at and scope out an alternative approach and compare it to what's happening, get an open public discussion about it, and then present that to the county commissioners, who will act in their infinite wisdom on what I'm sure is in the best interest of the region. And we're supposed to do that by the end of the year.
Steve?
Can you list one or two concrete things that such an authority could do that would be of benefit to Falmouth?
As of right now, no, because we've just started the process of thinking about it.
Just that you could imagine in your vision or imagination.
In my mind, I think, the potential that a regional authority might bring is, in the aggregate, an economy of two things, I guess. An economy of scale that we'd be looking to see, is there a way to implement a wastewater solution across the region? Not a solution that applies uniformly across the region, but a series of solutions that are scaled to each watershed, but are managed and financed on a regionalized basis, whether or not that would lower per capita cost of whatever that management structure is going to be. That's one thing that I think has the potential to do. The other is that I think unless and until the region has the ability to demonstrate a sort of a thoughtful regional approach, even if it has multiple different applications depending on where you are in the Cape, we're never going to attract any money from any state or federal source. So I think that one thing that we'd be evaluating is the likelihood of being able to bring in significant subsidy from outside sources so that the rate base on Cape Cod is not the only one bearing the burden of implementing these. Those are just two things off the top of my head I think we'd be looking at and trying to put some definition around.
Thank you.
Matt?
How would our this exercise that we're going through fit in with your regional wastewater authority? I mean, I don't see the county doing much in terms of figuring out if some of these alternatives to sewers will work. And Falmouth has taken it on our own. And frankly, it'd be great to have some help from the county. It doesn't seem to be.
I don't know why you say that. I mean, we just talked about submitting the ENF on behalf of the Falmouth and Yarmouth and Barnstable for the dredging project, the inlet widening, which is an alternative, intended to be an evaluation of an alternative approach that would minimize the need for upland controls. We've been working, on a variety of issues. We've got a proposal in, or I don't know if it went in yet or not, for the fall to, working with Valerie and some others to do an alternatives conference that is intended, among other things, to sort of break down the notion that in some way we're hostile to some of those things. We're working with a number of different towns on oyster propagation as a significant, defining the terms under which that could be used as a nitrogen management strategy. So, no, we're not doing all the same things that you're doing, and you may be doing some things that go above and beyond what we're doing, but I just don't get, and maybe we've done a poor job articulating our interest in alternatives and approach, but our vision of this and the thing we want to assess is whether or not in a regionalized approach, if you don't have towns going it alone, whether you can build less to achieve the same outcome at a lower cost and more quickly. And my own personal belief, and I think, the things that's reflected in the writings that we've done, is that a 15-town, one-at-a-time approach will result in more sewering than towns working together. Whether you buy the notion of a regional authority, or whether you think that towns have the ability now, which they do, although there's precious few examples of it actually happening, of towns teaming up and doing joint wastewater management programs. But I think, the best way to build the most infrastructure is to have each town go it alone, because because you're not looking at where in the watershed you get your greatest reductions for dealing with nitrogen. Because of the town boundary, you tend to go further away from the water, more so than you would if you were looking just at the watershed and not being impacted by the town boundary. The further up you go, the lower the per pound rate of reduction that comes from any nitrogen treatment system that you put in terms of the amount of nitrogen that actually comes out of that water body. It requires you to treat more homes. And so, I think go it alone. I frankly think that, a town-by-town approach, has us at the end of the day with more infrastructure than we would have if we opened our minds to a different way of thinking about it.
Just one quick comment, and I don't want to create an argument here, but with all due respect, I think that we are leading the way in this area, and if we waited for the county, we wouldn't be doing it. We wouldn't be sitting here today. And that's all I want to say.
Fair enough. Win.
I'd just like to say our eco toilet project, the demonstration project, would be very glad to have cooperation from other towns. It could cut our costs. It could make it possible for us to do a better project if we could have other towns cooperating with us on it. And if your collaborative could help us, I certainly would like to come and talk about that as a possibility.
Steve.
Yeah, my observation is that the historical model for creating joint entities involving several communities around the issue of wastewater have typically been on a watershed basis, whether it's the communities that ran down the Charles River and then the Neponset River that became the MWRA, whether it's the communities on the Blackstone that became the Upper Blackstone, whether it's Northbourne, Marlborough that combined together in the Assabet. And over time, the sort of political formation for why they did what they did because of the natural flow of the streams and the sort of the synergy of how to move wastewater or gather wastewater making sense led to that. It struck me when I read that in the paper that there's not a common thread, if you will, in terms of wastewater direction or propagation. You know, we have estuaries that are varying from Buzzards Bay side to the southern side. You have, help me out, John, 3 different lenses down the Cape, basically, of water, right? There's the Sagamore lens and the mid lens and the one down below. So even the groundwater defines different bodies of water. It's so difficult to wrestle with at the local level sometimes that it appears to be a purely political exercise to try to affect something that maybe there's not as much confidence that the communities on their own will get there. And I hope that that's not the case, but it doesn't seem to be a logical wastewater from a gravity goes downhill, sort of like you should combine together because it will be more efficient. I mean, this is my perspective of how the thing came together.
Fine. Virginia.
When you say you're going to meet with the 15 boards of selectmen, would you let us know,
Sure.
through Jerry, not only when you're going to meet with Falmouth, but when you're going to meet with Mashpee? Because when you talk about watersheds, the one watershed where we do share regionally that makes any sense is Mashpee. And our understanding is Mashpee is looking at cluster systems, and so we need to hear how they intend to move forward with that process.
That'd be fine. I mean, what we're gonna do is develop sort of a master schedule that sort of lays out when we think we're gonna be doing what and talking about what where.
Okay.
And we'll be publishing that. I haven't quite figured out exactly what the
Right.
appropriate method to do that is. So, you know, a lot of people have specific questions, sort of, that assume that certain decisions have been made. And, you know, not to be sort of dodging about it, but nothing, nothing's been decided, nothing's really been framed up yet. All we've been told to do 2 weeks ago was to figure this thing out and to do it between now and the end of the year. So, you know, as a personal aside, you know, I have a certain degree of impatience with this discussion in a sense, you know, having been one of the original Mashpee sewer commissioners in 1987, I think you could take an agenda that we used in 1987, post it for 2012, and nobody would really notice the difference. Because pretty much the agenda and what's been talked about and building around the existing privately owned wastewater treatment plant has been talked about since the mid-'80s. And not a hell of a lot's happened other than the water quality's gotten worse. So, you know, I find it, you know, I come at it from that perspective that, you know, leave it, you know, there's enough there to say, you know, does this work well enough leaving it to any one particular town to solve its problems over that time period? Is it good, are the results good enough that it's not worth asking the question, is there a better way to do it? And to my mind, you know, I mean, we've, you know, sort of had the wrath of God rain down on me the last 10 days over this issue. Like, you know, is anything wrong with actually thinking through an issue and trying to put some information behind whether or not a different approach makes sense or doesn't make sense? And to my mind, it's, you know, I've been somewhat struck by the hostility to evaluating an alternative that there is out there, like somebody's got some, you know, stake in the ground that we can't, and it's working so well that how would we possibly conceive of trying to think about a different way to build less at a lower cost so that people can actually afford to stay here and enjoy a resource that we're all trying to protect.
Well, if you're going to be making this grand tour of the selectmen, you may have to restrain your impatience some, because you may hear more of it than you have. But within the last few years, the commission and presumably the collaborative together have put out the idea that the cost of doing this is in the billions of dollars. I think that's a fair statement. And obviously the question for most people is going to be, aside from the hoped for federal and state contributions and the existing revenue streams that the towns already have, what other alternative revenue have you been contemplating to pay for all this?
Well, you know, one of the things you sort of want to think about is, you know, I think one of the reasons that a number of these proposals has failed is that the apportionment has been primarily based on those individuals who are perceived to benefit or connect to a system. So you have a very small number of people bearing a disproportionate cost to the community. So one of the ways to think about it is, you know, can you lower the overall per capita hit by expanding the range of people that are participating and funding it locally? And then what other potential off-Cape sources of revenue are there? You know, do you look at, you know, changing, you know, creating some local motel options? Do you look at, you know, taking a slice out of the sales tax? You know, any variety of things. I mean, nothing's been looked at enough or thought about enough to say this is the right way to go or the wrong way to go, or that shouldn't be considered. So, you know, that's going to be something we'll spend a fair amount of time on. You know, but you don't want, I think as a premise, the notion of having a Cape, the per capita cost of wastewater being disproportionately large relative to what the rest of the state pays for wastewater is something that, you know, that's kind of equity and consistency is an objective that I think we'd probably want to put out there that we're not even coming close to at this point. And the other notion, just put it out there, is that for those people in Massachusetts who receive wastewater treatment, 70% of them get it from a regional system in this state. You know, on the other side of the bridge, there's nothing new about it, and you're right. I mean, most of those regional entities have been created around major drainage basins. And the fact that we don't have one on the Cape, you know, creates, you know, a challenge about it, and sort of what's your sort of rational reason for being as an entity. You know, is it around the wastewater management of a given river basin? No, that's not going to be the case here. But there are a lot of bases upon which we think about regional services on the Cape that are not built around a specific natural resource, but are built around the Cape as an identified region that shares some commonalities, some differences certainly. And, you know, is there a rationale around which you build a regional wastewater management component? If there is, fine. If there isn't, then I think the idea dies of its own weight.
Matt?
I would just like to say that I think maybe you should consider, or your group should consider, coming to speak to this group before you go to the selectmen, or at least put us in line for a similar discussion.
I mean, well, you know, I mean, group, if you will, it's going to be some combination, and I, you know, told the board this yesterday that, you know, they're going to need to go with me.
Bodyguards.
No, not even that. You know, for whatever set of combination of reasons, you know, the people that are opposed to this have already decided I've made up my mind. This is all a process to dress up a decision that's already been made. You know, and I don't control what those 17 individuals think about any of this stuff, and they'll hear different things than I do. So, you know, we'll come and listen to groups that want to talk to us. I mean, the whole point of it is to gather up information, you know. And like I said, I haven't figured out, you know, whether we're going to have sort of an open meeting thing, you know, in Falmouth. You know, I don't know. Well, we'll work out those kind of details. You know, I've also heard a fair amount of criticism yesterday that, well, you know, your board meetings are in the morning, and, you know, that discourages people from coming to participate.
It's true.
And I've also heard when we hold night meetings that those are designed to discourage people from participate. So, you know, my guess is we're going to have some mix of some nights, some mornings. Might, you know, frankly, I might end up doing, you know, 2 sessions in one town, one in the morning and one in the evening, just so that people can't say that, you know, we scheduled it in a way to exclude the input from one particular town. So there'll be opportunities, and I'll, you know, talk about the schedule.
Okay. Any comment from any non-board members here? Mr. Finneran? Find the microphone, and after him.
You seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on kind of a joint approach to this with other towns, but, you know, if you look over on the map there, you can see that we got 4 embayments, brown, red, green, purple. The purple one is the only one that we share with another town. We don't have any plans on even doing anything there for another 25 years. And I mean, if you put easy math on it, that only amounts to 12.5% of our problem. So, I mean, it's not like, you know, the Assabet Valley and, you know, as is spoken before. So I don't think it's as important that we have a county-wide approach as it may be in other areas. Just an observation.
Hilda.
Yeah, Hilda Menge. Just a little comment about the fact that we are not so eager to go along, is because I've followed Paul and various presentations over the years, and there used to be nothing about alternatives, and then the alternatives came in because Falmouth took the lead, and up to only a couple of weeks ago, he still refused to put eco-toilets in his presentations. And I've asked him over and over to put that in his presentation as part of an alternative, to be open-minded about it, and he has not done so yet.
Okay, any other comments from the board, the committee, or the public? If not, Andrew, you've held up very well. We thank you for coming, and we will have you and your 17 colleagues back again.
I doubt all 17 of them will travel with me. Anyway, happy to come back whenever you want me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you're welcome to stay. This next piece may be of some interest to you. We're talking about...
It may be of interest to me, but my 13-year-old son is waiting for me in the car. Will
Oh,
not
well.
find it that interesting.
should have brought him in.
He didn't want to come in. He's heard this before. He's sick of it. Good night.
Thank you very
Good
much.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Nate Weeks, the town's consultant from GHD, is going to do a couple of things here tonight. First one is an update on the effluent discharge sites 7 and 10. These are the two sites near the wastewater treatment plant in West Falmouth. He's going to give us a short presentation on that, and then a slightly longer one on the history of the town's efforts to find effluent disposal sites and to evaluate them, and possible future options in that regard. Nate.
Thank you, Eric. And many of you have seen this. Let's see, I'm going to turn this off.
Just put the cap on it.
What? You're turning it off?
Yes.
Just put the cap on
I'll
it.
put the cap on it.
Turn it off, it has to start.
That works.
Many of you have seen this chart before, which was one that was developed during the time of the CWMP Review Committee, and the development of additional sites to investigate for treated water recharge. And the two that I'm going to be talking about in more detail is Site 7 and Site 10, the two that are closest to the wastewater treatment plant, and the recommended proposal of the CWMP Review Committee to use that treatment plant and to go outside of the West Falmouth Harbor watershed to these two recharge sites. And to do additional studies for those two particular sites, particularly focused on archaeological resources that may be there that may prevent its use for treated water recharge, as well as endangered species in a natural habitat that's there. First, I'll talk about Site 7, which looks like this, particularly as we got further into the evaluation. It didn't just become the property, but it was modified to provide buffer to the property line where there's a developed property to the north, as well as providing some buffer from the West Falmouth Harbor watershed line, which is right here. And as you'll recall, in various evaluations, there was investigations to determine what sort of infiltration capacity there is at this particular site. And then also there was investigation of where would the water go that was recharged at this site. Would it move into West Falmouth Harbor? Where would it go? And what possible receptors it might affect. And those evaluations were completed. The main focus of what I'm going to present tonight is the investigations that we have done for archaeological resources as well as natural habitat. And starting with natural habitat, I probably should do the same thing for Site 10 because both sites are really quite similar in terms of their natural habitat and their potential for archaeological resources. So Site 10 is a little bit further up. And the investigations that I just talked about in terms of what's the capacity and where does the treated water flow indicated that just this portion of the site would be needed to handle the phase 1 and 2 flows, which were documented at that time. And by not using this portion of the site, we would do away with the potential for some of that treated water moving into the West Falmouth Harbor watershed. You'll remember that there was a particle track analysis, and there were particle tracks that when the flow was moved up into this area, there were particle tracks that moved around to West Falmouth Harbor. So this is the area, and this area does have sufficient capacity. Also, some communication with Peter Boyer indicated that some of the discussions with the land bank and 500 committee,
300.
300 committee,
Could be 500.
Someday it'll be 500.
They've gone past
has indicated that really the movement is to just secure this portion of the site at this time. And so that was another reason which has sort of led into this.
Well, Nate, you talk about the capacity. What capacity are we talking about here?
And acreage.
And acreage.
Boy, those weren't things that I brushed up on. They are documented in those two technical memorandum.
Okay.
They are sufficient to be able to handle the flows from the phase 1 and 2 areas, which are the existing flows that are being collected, as well as the flows from those multicolored sewer sheds on that map.
Do you need both sites for the flow, or will either site handle it?
Both sites are needed
Both
for
sites
that
are needed.
flow, yes.
Okay.
And I think he used 7 gallons per day per square foot as a, I mean, that was pretty conservative. We might get more, but that's the planning factor.
Yes, and there's a very basic engineering factor that goes into that capacity analysis of what's the infiltration rate. And there were infiltration load tests that were done. And 7 gallons per day per square foot was the normally prescribed factor, which is higher than the DEP prescribed factor by about 30%. So it is a savings in terms of land area over what DEP would normally give you. And that was part of the basis.
Were these flows determined just using available USGS data, or did somebody go out and do some additional flow testing to see how accurate they were?
Yeah, there was additional flow testing where there was a very large infiltration test that ran over a series of days to see how much water could go into the site.
I get that. That tells you about the percolation, but where it goes afterwards was the question.
The groundwater modeling that was used to determine whether there would be mounding that might cause flooding on neighboring properties, as well as the particle tracks of where does the groundwater move, was based on a USGS regional groundwater model.
Okay, so there were no additional data collections to verify the USGS information. Is that correct?
No, there was not any
With-
more groundwater wells or
Right, that's my
something like
question.
that.
Would there be if the sites proceeded to go ahead?
There could be additional modeling or investigation if required by the environmental impact review process.
Okay.
Typically, that level of investigation of groundwater modeling and hydraulic load testing has been sufficient to determine the feasibility of a site in terms of its acceptability of whether it can receive the water and where it will transmit the water to.
Steve.
If I can jump in and help you out a little bit. In response to your question about flows, when you gave us this summary back in October, Nate, on this, I'm holding up the copy of what you used at that time. At that time, the average annual phase 1 and 2 flows was 2.1 million gallons, and the peak flow was 3.8. And so I believe that's the numbers you've been using in what you've been looking at in terms of areas and everything. Is that, you haven't changed the number, right?
No, you have not
Okay,
changed the number,
I
right?
just want to frame this. So
Yeah.
currently
Yeah.
the plant's about 500,000.
That's correct.
And we don't yet have a timeline for how much flow we will have over time. But at the ultimate sort of boundary that was set up a long time ago of the 2.1 flow and 3.8, that's what your analysis has been working around those numbers, correct?
The
The
analysis
particle
has,
tracking you
the
have and
analysis on the amount of water that's going there hasn't changed from the information you're looking at.
Correct.
Right, so it's the
so
maximum picture.
It's the maximum picture,
Fine, okay,
okay?
that's
Got
good.
it.
And at this point in time, in terms of any of the particle tracker thing, if we were to be saying, well, over 20 years, we want to add, I'll just pick a random number, 500,000, you haven't taken a look yet at what 500,000 would be like.
No, we haven't.
Okay, all right,
Okay,
Good.
that's good.
that's fine.
So we believe, based on the maximum situation that we were looking at, that these two sites are feasible to infiltrate it. We've looked at where the model says the particles move to, and we have looked at the habitat here to see whether there would be possible restrictions from endangered species and those types of things. And the steps that we have taken is we've contacted the state and federal agencies that deal with natural heritage and endangered species. We have walked the site and looked for the natural habitat to get an understanding of, does it vary? Are there wetlands on the site? Are there many variations? Are there observations of unusual habitat or wildlife? Some of the findings of that are that there are no wetlands on the sites. The topography is very undulating. It varies at this site from 60 to 80 feet. It's very rolling. From here, it varies from 80 to 120 feet. And when I say varies, those are elevations above mean sea level. And for those of you who've walked in that area, and there are quite a few walking trails as well as bicycle trails and probably some four-wheeler trails in there as well. It's very rolling. There are boulders. It is outwash plain and moraine type of deposits from the glacial periods. It's a mixture of deciduous and coniferous forests. It is very uniform, and these are parts of a very large forest and area in this area. There's quite a bit of conservation land, and there is quite a bit of area in here. When we researched and went to the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife and their Natural Heritage Program, which governs the Endangered Species Program, this whole area, and we knew that it was a priority estimated habitat for endangered species. And when we inquired what are the endangered species that are in this area that they believe are there, that we would have to be careful of, they said it's the turtle, box turtle. And so that's an observation. It's something that would need to be addressed. Typically, the way it is addressed is to talk to Natural Heritage Program and see what they would want us to do with it. And wanting us to do with it means what sort of mitigation would be needed for the particular project. And often this starts looking ahead to the construction projects of constructing these types of facilities here. And typical mitigation for turtles is to put up barriers to exclude them from the construction site. And the barrier is typically some silt fence so that as turtles are walking around, moving from one area to another, they bump up against the silt fence and they can't go into a construction site where they would get damaged. And it even goes so far, the mitigation is to actually have people that are assigned to walk the perimeter periodically, look for turtles. If they find them bumped up against the silt fence, they take them and relocate them to an area. So that is typically the method that's done to avoid the impact to the endangered species that is known to be in this area. Those are some of the details that would need to be worked out to address that issue. And the natural heritage, endangered species requirements are very important, and they would need to be, addressed in a serious manner.
Questions from the committee? Matt?
I seem to remember that the town designated a wildlife corridor in that area.
That's right.
How would that, where is that, and how would that be treated? Is it within that demarcation there?
Yep, I don't know of it. I don't know where it is.
To my knowledge, the wildlife corridor starts at Thomas Landers Road and runs north, and it runs along the east side of Route 28, and it's 100 feet wide, so it would not impact Site 10. I don't believe the corridor is south of Thomas Landers Road, but that's my vague memory. And I know that it runs all the way up to Route 151, but my memory was it was Thomas Landers Road to 151, runs on parallel to Route 28 on the east side, and that it's 100 feet wide. And I believe it runs right along the boundary of Route 28.
Well, wherever it is, you better include that in your analysis.
Well, checking with the planning board, Brian Curry, he would know for sure.
Maybe I can.
Somebody knows here.
Your name?
Could you speak to the microphone, please, and identify yourself?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is, thank you. Okay, my name is Pat Hanley, and if you pull up Site 7, okay. On Site 7, if you look to your right a little bit, you'll see kind of like a gray area. That's my house.
That's your house.
And if you go...
This one?
Yes, that's my house.
Okay.
And if you go to the left, just between the blue and the yellow, go down a little bit, keep going all the way down till you come to the blue area, the end of the blue area. Okay, between the blue and the yellow area, that's the deer corridor. And the deer corridor goes from 151 all the way to Little Pond.
Little Pond?
Little Pond?
The pond
Long-
over...
Long Pond.
Long Pond,
Long
I'm sorry.
part. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Good,
So it
that's
goes
very helpful.
that whole length.
It's 300 feet wide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very extensive.
Okay.
Okay?
300 feet wide? I think no, it's 100. When they did,
Well, we need to check.
We need to
We
check.
don't
I
know.
thought, you might have to check it, because I thought it was increased.
Yeah.
I
Well,
really do. Because you have to understand, on the other side of the yellow line is the state owns.
Right, this is the
Part
right
of the
the
highway.
right of way. Yeah.
Right,
right, okay, well, we need
Okay.
to check it out.
okay.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on this portion of the presentation? Steve? And then Matt.
I've heard concerns, mostly from the 300 committee, that the plume from this site would enter Crocker Pond. I don't know that for a fact, but I know that's a concern of many.
I'd like to jump in on this one if I can. I think that, as often happens, people take a piece of information and jump to a conclusion with it. When the town acquired these sites, we acquired these sites for the purposes of bringing them into the wastewater system, if you will. And we did some evaluations to look at, for lack of a better word here, the simplest thing, permeability. And as we had a discussion a minute ago, the numbers that we've been using looking at permeability is a big number relative to our current flows. That's a projection to a point that we don't even know whether or not we're going to ever get there. And they did a good job of doing particle plumes and everything else. And when you look at those, it raises a large host of questions as to how much effluent we can actually put on either one of these parcels, and what the real, for lack of a better word, safe load at either one of these sites might be. Buzzards Bay Coalition wrote a long letter to the town commenting on the 9. It's just a start. I want everybody to understand it's just a start. It's a piece of land. We've determined it's got permeability. We've determined where particles would go at a build-out loading number that we got a while back. But we've not made any decisions as to, A, if we are truly using them now or at some future time, and for how much effluent. And I say there's a lot more analysis and study before we can conclusively say whether a pond or a watershed or an area is going to be ultimately impacted and at what level of flow. You know, is it 100,000 we can put it out there? Is it zero? Is it a $500,000? Is it 100,000? Is it 700,000? Is it 500,000? We don't know that. We don't know any of that right now. And for people to presume that we know that and we've made firm decisions and that, you know, there's this host of environmental disasters that are looming over everybody is good that they raise those concerns, but I want to state that we've not made any of those decisions to make those go in, and we are very cognizant of the fact, I believe from what happened with the first wastewater treatment plant and effluent plumes, that it's going to take a lot of thought, knowledge, and understanding before we make any hard decisions here. I would offer that as a group and as a community, for us to think we've got two sites and we know what we can do with wastewater effluent in the future would be a very short-sighted approach on our part. We should continue to keep open and keep looking for and keep in mind other locations that we might be able to use. You know, what was the phrase you used earlier about hooking up sewers? You had a phrase for whether different
Checkerboard.
Checkerboarding. You know, we may find ourselves at the 20 years or 30 years out from this of some type of checkerboard approach. Some effluent can go here, some effluent can go there, if we ever get up into a number in the 2 million range. I don't believe that we're going to get to there myself, but I do believe that the 500,000 we're doing at the existing site is not enough for some foreseeable needs.
Yeah.
And I think it's prudent and was wise in the part of the town to get the two sites we got. Long speech there, but I just wanted to reassure everybody that we don't know about Crockett Pond. And we don't know about anything else.
But we will.
Good points. Matt, then Steve?
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, now's the time to raise concerns, though. I think
Oh, yeah.
this is the time to raise concerns.
Absolutely.
And with the other site, which is the one further north, is it 10?
Yes.
You know, that is right in line with a lot of stuff that's part of West Falmouth Harbor, the upper reaches of West Falmouth Harbor. So, you know, we need to know if those are going to be influenced. And from the label on, if you pick up the other, pick that one up again, Nate. The label on the left side seems to be covering up a lot of the, West Falmouth Harbor area. So, you know, I can see the plumes coming down there, and we just need more definition of what's going to happen there. I'm looking at John's thing, and it looks like it goes right into those areas.
Steve?
I think this is just a nerdy way of saying what Matt just said. Obviously, what we want is a scaled version of the particle track for a variety of different flow rates, right? Is that already in the works?
That would be an exercise we would have to ask to have done once we get to a point where we think there's a flow that we want to use for effluent at one of these sites. We don't have a number yet. We don't know what number to go to.
I was assuming that perhaps it was relatively inexpensive to just, you have it at 100%. To do it at 75, 50, and 25 might be a relatively simple scaling.
What does a particle track run cost us? No, just in terms of us, does it take weeks or months? Does it take weeks or months today?
10,000.
It would take a month
Take a month.
to do a
Okay.
series of particle track analyses and produce a small little document that summarizes the findings.
Okay. How much money?
Under
You
100?
want me to guess?
Yes, yes.
Affordable, say affordable.
Well, it is affordable.
Thank
I
you.
would guess that
Good,
it's
that's
Okay,
enough.
thank you.
under $20,000.
That's enough.
Okay.
Affordable's enough.
It's affordable compared to cleaning up those things.
Okay, public comment from the coalition representative and anybody else, and then we got to move on. We're in the danger of violating the Mrs. Rafferty rule, which is to have spent 10 minutes on this subject.
Little does he know that's my mother, not my wife.
So I just,
What is her name?
Wilson.
The Mrs. Wilson rule.
so we have submitted extensive comments on these two discharge sites, and so I won't go through them all because you have them. But the one thing I would say in terms of the amount of flow we're looking at for impacting West Falmouth Harbor, the TMDL for West Falmouth Harbor is met by a flow from the wastewater treatment plant of 500,000 gallons per day at 3 milligrams per liter. So that's where we are now. So you add anything to West Falmouth Harbor and it's a problem. So if either of these locations are putting wastewater into West Falmouth Harbor is a problem.
We are acutely conscious of that, and this committee has, in its initial statement of its views on the matter, has made it clear we intend to put no more than currently goes there into West Falmouth Harbor.
That's what we like to hear.
Good.
Jerry?
Well, one of the things, and you know, we're not there yet, and it could be separate tracks, is that when we submit the draft CWMP, or if we choose to expedite this and go with a separate ENF, that is the time when we start getting back more detailed information from the state. Obviously, you'd probably reiterate your comments, and we could run additional runs now, but it could be better to wait to see after we get the regulatory input, the public's input, and then make a decision. Do we put more investment into these sites, or do we think, well, we don't want to go there for policy reasons?
Fair enough. Okay. To the microphone, please.
Okay. I just have one question. As a result of my farm and residency being beside this, how is it going to affect a residency? Do we know that yet? Or, you know, with the flow, how it's going to affect it? Is there, you know, when you start pumping this into the ground, how is it going to affect my property being beside Site 7?
I would offer that it's more likely to look like a flooded cranberry bog than anything else.
Really?
If this is clean water coming out, it's you know, the plan is to have what? It's pretty clean water, right?
That's a good point that I don't think the public understands here.
I just think I'm concerned.
We're talking about water that has been treated to 3 parts per milliliter. Drinking water standards require 10 parts.
So it's cleaner
this
than
is
drinking water.
3 times less nitrogen in it than drinking water. So it is not. It's going to look pretty clean, and it's going to be pretty clean.
Okay.
And there'll be a buffer.
Right.
Right.
It's not wastewater at that point.
Okay.
But and I would characterize it, because I have thought about this. I would characterize it looking more like a flooded cranberry. A lot of times, if unless the flow's high enough, it'll be soaking in. Correct? It's not a standing pond. I mean, it will be soaking in. And at certain times, it might look a little more like a flooded cranberry bog.
All right, we're seriously violating the Mrs. Wilson rule at this point. So, and you have eaten into your time to tell us about the past efforts at effluent disposal, site evaluation, and possible next steps. So, if you could make that one faster than the last one, we would be here and get out before 11 o'clock.
In my defense, I didn't even think I was going to be talking about the particle tracks or the flows. I was going to be talking about endangered species and archaeological
You're taking up time, Nate.
studies. We never even talked about archaeological studies.
Was the result 0?
Yes, it was 0.
Okay,
there were
fine.
no archaeological
Right,
studies.
on.
But there is the potential that they're there.
Of course, of course.
There's potential,
So-
there's gold up there.
One thing it's important to point out, and this is very short, is that we have looked at a lot of sites.
Yes, so let's talk about this.
And this is work that goes back to the alternative screening analysis, and all of these green sites were investigated and quantified and screened in or screened out. And certainly from that evaluation, there was a more focused look on the golf course site that was right here as the prime site for treated water recharge in this area. Because it is within the planning area right here. It was purchased by the town for wastewater management reasons, and it does offer some good opportunity for wastewater treatment and treated water recharge. That was the main focus. As the plan went forward, the plan went into a very high-tech mode where the goal was to reuse the treated water. Treat it to a very high level so that it could be recharged into Zone 2 drinking water areas in accordance with Massachusetts DEP regulations, which does allow it. So the treatment would have been at the MMR site with recharge and with injection wells along this road corridor, which would distribute it out across the planning area, this group of watersheds. As that plan was reviewed and the decision was made to shift the treatment to the Blacksmith Shop Road site right here, and to look at particularly sites that were closer to the Blacksmith Shop Road site, but outside of the West Falmouth Harbor watershed. That's where we started to look at these sites in more detail and ultimately chose Site 7 and Site 10. But there have been many additional sites that have been looked at in really quite a bit of detail, as we've also gone back and reviewed the work that's been done by previous wastewater management planning projects as well. And on here, you'll see that the outfall at Knobska Point is identified here. It isn't identified, but there was also an evaluation of a potential outfall into the Cape Cod Canal. So that's a map that summarizes the sites that have been investigated to date.
How many sites would just roughly would you say we have looked at?
I would say that there's probably 25 there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah, you originally had them A, B, C, D, E, and you went entirely through the alphabet, so.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, there's probably closer to 30.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Steve. I'm sorry, John. Here we go. John Waterbury, a member of the Board of Health, former member of the Review Committee, and senior scientist emeritus from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, who knows more than all of us put together about a lot of things, including this subject.
There's also a pretty good blueberry bush pruner, I heard.
Okay, well, Eric asked me to make the case for the outfall option.
Okay.
And for me, this is an easy thing to do. I've given you copies of the PowerPoints if you
In
want.
honor of the blueberry, I have that.
I think it's no secret that I've been a proponent of an outfall for a very long time and have been trying to make the case for why we should be thinking about this. And I think this watershed map of Falmouth makes the case for why we should think about this seriously, as well as Nate's presentation. I mean, we've been scouring ourselves around town looking for parcels, and almost every place that we look at turns into problems. And the problem is that we have a town with about 90 miles of coastline, 11 coastal ponds, and everywhere we think about putting something is in a watershed for one of those embayments. And in addition, the microbiology which is used in sewage treatment has limits. And when we treat to the best we can microbiologically, we get about 90% nitrogen removal, which means that we get to somewhere in the order of 3 milligrams per liter. And when we discharge that in upper watersheds, that 10% potentially knocks our ponds out. And so I think that is why we need to think in some, I think Falmouth is a pretty special case. There are probably no other towns in the Commonwealth that have this sort of shoreline with this many embayments and this few possibilities of discharge sites that won't impact some water body. So just to give a little bit of history, we had an outfall in Woods Hole Harbor from 1946 to 1985 that just served Woods Hole Center. And that was basically releasing raw sewage into Great Harbor with a little bit of chlorination. And the greatest impact it seemed to have was that there were lots of lobsters that were caught around the outlet over those 40 years.
Big lobsters. That's not the only.
So then in 1970, when we were trying to consider what we were going to do when we centered the rest of town, there was a discussion, there were two possibilities that were discussed at some considerable length at town meeting. One was putting a sewage treatment plant in Woods Hole, sort of on the Fay Road place, with a discharge and an outfall at Knobska Point. And the other site was our current site in West Falmouth. And there was a group of scientists at the Oceanographic who were charged with doing a series of experiments to look at the impacts that having an outfall would have both on our sole source aquifer and on the receiving bodies that the Vineyard Sound. And with the technologies that were available in 1971, they basically came to the conclusions that that outfall, as proposed at that time, would not negatively impact the sole source aquifer, nor would it have a detrimental impact on the receiving body. And those studies were published in the Journal of the Boston Society of Civil Engineers as 3 consecutive. And they make sort of a neat piece of history, and if anybody's interested, I have scanned those in, and they make sort of neat reading. The first one goes through the whole discussion at town meeting and the arguments that went back and forth about it. And I always like to quote my next door neighbor, Hank Stommel, who was a very famous physical oceanographer, who said, in our wisdom, we decided we'd rather drink it than swim in it when we made our decision on the right. So, okay, so here now we need to make the case. And in order to make the case successfully for an outfall, we need to consider 3 things. 1, what are the impacts going to be on our sole source aquifer? What are the impacts going to be on the potential receiving body? And how horrendous are the regulatory hurdles that would be necessary to get an outfall permitted? And if we go back, these are slides I basically nicked from Dennis LeBlanc at USGS. And this just shows the Sagamore lens that we have, and shows the lines of which way the water flows. And then on the right, I did some calculations. So the land area of Falmouth is about 44.2 square miles of land. USGS has used conservatively a recharge for Bourne and Falmouth of 21 inches per year, and that's about 45% of the annual rainfall. LeBlanc, in his normal presentation, uses 26 inches per inch. And he has calculated, or USGS has calculated, that the discharge to the coast is about 1.0015 million gallons per day per square mile. And if you do that calculation for the area of Falmouth, that means that every day our portion of the Sagamore lens discharges about 44 million gallons per day to the coastline. And somewhere between 40 and 50, and depending on the numbers you plug in. But it's a very large volume of water. And just as an example, one of the things which we probably don't think about very much, if we look at our Coonamessett River, that river discharges in March 9 million gallons per day. In June, it drops to about 6 million gallons per day. So that's, you know, something that we pass by all the time, and I don't think any of us consider that there are 9 million gallons flowing down into Great Pond every day from that river in March. So by far the biggest impact on our aquifer that we do in town is withdrawing water from it for drinking. We have about 15,000 households in Falmouth, and we have a variety of water sources. Probably 90% of those 15,000 households are on town water. We still have maybe 10% of our households are on well water. And if you look at our average water uses, we use about 3 million gallons per day in the winter. In the summer, we jump up to about 6 million gallons, and the peak withdrawal is about 11 million gallons per day on some summer weekends. And if you look at our sources, and our sources are those green dots down in Falmouth. Long Pond, we have the only surface water reservoir on the Cape. It supplies about 50% of our water in the winter and about 66% of our overall water. We then have the Coonamessett well. The 2 dots that are right close together are the Coonamessett well and the Crooked Pond well. Coonamessett is capable of delivering 1 million gallons per day. Crooked Pond, 1.47. Those 2 wells run through a treatment plant which we've built in the last few years that treats water to a very high level. We then have the Mare's Pond well, which is the little one down below the double one. That well is capable of 350,000 gallons per day. And the Fresh Pond well is the one furthest east, is capable of 800,000 gallons per day. And then there are 3 red dots which don't show well up in the northern part of Sandwich, which are the community water system that was put in the early 2000s. And we typically draw 1 million gallons a day from that during the summer. And what our water department does is juggles the withdrawals from those various wells so that it doesn't negatively impact water levels, groundwater levels in the town. If you look at the USGS models, for instance, we draw so much from Long Pond that there's about a 1 to 2 foot drop in groundwater levels around Long Pond that we see typically. Normally, as far as the USGS models, we don't have drawdowns at our other wells, at least that they show in their maps. So this is really where we most impact our aquifer. And if one thinks about a place like Seacoast Shores, where we have 900 house lots, if we say on average we deliver 150 gallons per house lot there, that's 135,000 gallons a day that we deliver to Seacoast Shores. And that's water that, you know, under Indian conditions before we colonized the place, wasn't there. And it's just going sideways laterally into our ponds, basically through our Tidal V systems. So I think, at least I'm very comfortable in making the case that discharging, just as an example, 1 million gallons a day through an ocean outfall would have very little impact on our aquifer as we now know it. We often say that we have water restrictions in the summer, and people will say, well, you know, why do we have those? That's not because our aquifer can't deliver all the water we need. It's we can't afford to withdraw it from the ground and supply it at levels that are, that's why we try and limit ourselves. It's not because the aquifer can't deliver lots of water. So I'm perfectly comfortable as a scientist to say, okay, there's really no reason to not think about an outfall as far as the recharge characteristics of our sole source aquifer. So what then would be the impacts on the receiving body where we would put that water? And I just used the Boston outfall as an example. I mean, we all know that the Boston outfall has gotten a huge amount of press. People have followed it. People on the Cape were very concerned before it went online what it was going to do to Cape Cod Bay. It went online in September of 2000. It discharges 350 million gallons a day of secondary treated water. And that means that the BOD is knocked down, but all of the nitrogen that's in that water goes into Cape Cod Bay. That nitrogen amounts to 11,000 metric tons of nitrogen per year, mostly as ammonia. And if you work that back to 1 million gallons, that's 190 pounds of nitrogen per 1 million gallons discharged. And if we were to, just as a theoretical point, to say we were going to have an outflow of 1 million gallons, if we treated it to the level we're treating at West Falmouth at the moment, to 3 milligrams per liter with tertiary treatment, we would be putting out 25 pounds of nitrogen per 1 million gallons discharged, or, you know, about 1/10 of what is going into the Boston outfall. And here again, I quoted 2 studies which you can find easily online. The effects, the monitoring effects. So they've monitored for 10 years on the Boston outfall, and they have not been able to see any negative impacts of that enormous amount of nitrogen that they've been putting into Cape Cod Bay. And the other thing to keep in mind is the Boston outfall is not just residential discharge. It's industrial discharge that they have to deal with metals and all sorts of other things that are there. And it's also road runoff, neither of which we would have in a system in Falmouth. So there again, just by comparison, and I think even going back to those earlier studies in 1971, I'd be very comfortable as a scientist say that if we put in 1 million gallons at 3 million gallons per day into our receiving waters, that we would not find a demonstrable impact to the receiving. 3 milligrams per liter. And I feel very comfortable that that's the case. So why wouldn't one consider an outfall? And I think this is why. That the regulatory hurdles are substantial. The Ocean Sanctuaries Act came in the mid-70s. It essentially precludes discharge into the marine coastal waters. They have a 12-step variance procedure that you can follow to, in theory, get a variance to put an outfall. No one to date has ever been granted one of those variances. And it would probably require a home rule petition to the legislature. Now, the one encouraging thing is that in the town's discussions recently with DEP, they seem to have been much more receptive, at least to entertaining the idea of an outfall. Just several years ago, they wouldn't even talk about it. I think they've come to the realization when they've watched how much trouble we've had identifying sites and seeing, and I think Falmouth is a pretty unique situation. For instance, Barnstable would love to have an outfall, but I don't believe that the aquifer in the mid-Cape would support that sort of discharge. We happen to be, I think, in a very unique position to be able to make it work. And I really think it ought to be part of our mix. There is one last slide. Steve gave me a slide, and I'll let him walk you through it.
This is
For what it's worth.
It's wrong.
California.
For what it's worth, right now we spend a fair amount of energy pumping our wastewater to the top of the highest piece of land in town. It's got an elevation up there of around 130 to 140 feet USGS. And I said, well, if there was an outfall, and just using the 500,000 gallons that we currently are discharging to the ground, and let it run back downhill and taking out some numbers to account for energy loss through the diffuser and other things, we would be getting back 225, the equivalent of 225 horsepower from the 500,000 gallons we have. You know, and if we got up to a higher number, the 1.2 million gallons per day, which is another just number off the spot, we'd basically getting back 10% of the energy we're getting out of one of the wind turbines by that. So if we do go the outfall route over time, and we do get into running the economics, there's some money to be gained back, and it's pretty clean water, so the turbine would probably run pretty good.
So what
So
would
you-
probably run pretty
turbine.
You put
Run
a
fine.
turbine in the
I mean, it's
pipe.
actually a great
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
because you've got a
Water
steady
power.
flow of water going back out there. It's not a variable flow. It's not going up and down. The turbine will be very happy with the steady flow. I want to offer one other data point if I can, John. When they drew I forget, is it marine sanctuary? Just go back one slide to your ocean sanctuaries. I just want to be sure I have the right word. When they drew the boundary for the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, at the time they were drawing it up, if you go to the opposite side of Buzzards Bay, there's a line drawn at one point coming off of the Acushnet River that defines the boundary for the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. The city of New Bedford runs a wastewater treatment plant that has an ocean outfall, or an outfall, immediately on the other side of the Ocean Sanctuaries line, does discharge to Buzzards Bay, and I do not know of what data sets they do or do not have. They do not provide tertiary treatment at this time. They are much more equivalent to the MWRA's level of treatment. But that might be another data point as we're thinking about this to see what they're discharging and what the long-term effects, if any, have been from that. And perhaps the Buzzards Bay Coalition would have some information about that we could gather up from them over time too.
Thank you, John. This is terrific. Comments from the committee. Steve?
I heard somewhere that since there was already an outfall historically at Woods Hole, that you're a few steps up legally at re-energizing that particular.
There is some question if you look at the conditions, the variance conditions in the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, one of the things I believe it says is that you have to have an existing outfall. So they're basically saying if you have one, we might let you upgrade it.
You mean
Now,
one running or historically?
Well, it depends how anxious DEP might be to help us out. Whether they would stretch the fact that for 40 years we had an ocean outfall. I mean, I think this is all things that we'll need to discuss, and I think it's basically not germane to the discussion at the moment.
And you couldn't use the pipe that's there.
Oh, absolutely
Right,
not.
it's the wrong location, no
No,
matter
the
what you do.
footprint, and it's like a building footprint.
Right. I did have this conversation with Paul Nitwicki recently on this, and he brought up the fact that you had one until 1985 is in your favor, and it's the only Cape town that can say that. And the fact that we have 44 million gallons a day from our lens pouring out of the coast every day, no other part of the Cape can say that. So we are uniquely situated to at least make the case, if we wanted to make the case, that we were different. Comments or questions from the committee? Comments or questions from the public?
With the engineer.
Or the engineer? Yeah.
There was a very good conference that was held at the Yarmouth Realty Building half a year ago, maybe a year ago now, put on by the Waquoit Bay Group, and the director of Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management was there and spoke. I believe the DPW, DEP commissioner was there. There was a private attorney, municipal attorney who deals with these issues quite a bit. It was a very good flow of information, and Waquoit Bay did a very good job of bringing this information to municipal decision makers. So there has been some good community outreach work by Waquoit Bay. There are some hurdles. You know, we looked at it as part of the CWMP. At first, we screened it out, and then we brought it back in due to popular demand. We developed some costs for a conceptualized outfall at Nobsca Point, because sometimes it is interesting to take a look at the costs, even though the feasibility may be questionable. So there is some information that's been developed, and so the decision-making path and discussion path, you know, from this point on is, as John depicts it, you know, there is a variance process, and also there is home rule petition to try to go forward with it. But certainly either of those methods would need to have some pretty strong popular support in that from the town's populace, as well as the regulatory support would be needed as well.
One point you made in your earlier draft there was that, particularly around these peninsulas, we are today putting that water into the ocean in the form of an outfall, except we're filtering it through the estuaries and killing things off along the way. But it's the same water that you'd be putting out into the deep, except it's not treated and it's killing things in the estuaries.
And so really, I think, yeah, the real take-home point there is that it's the nearshore environment that is very sensitive to nitrogen. The beyond nearshore environment, you know, isn't very sensitive, particularly when it's put into a well-flushed area such as Vineyard Sound. And it is the same water that it's making its way out there. The same nitrogen load is making its way out there.
Well, if we treat it tertiarily, it's a tenth of the load that we're putting into our coastal ponds.
Yeah, certainly, yeah, with respect to that, yeah.
Right, we're putting in untreated nitrogen load now.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Further comments or questions on this? It's an important topic, because if there's going to be any additional sewage of any kind treated at this plant, it has to go somewhere else than where it goes now. And these are the options that are before us.
I'll just quickly say that in terms of, you know, particularly given looking at the difficulty of where you can discharge, finding discharge locations, groundwater discharge locations being difficult, the Buzzards Bay Coalition, you know, supports the idea of looking at an outfall at Nobsca as an alternative to get rid of the wastewater.
Thank you. Okay, Wynn Monroe. You're up.
John, is it?
No, I think Hilda had her
Oh, I'm sorry.
hand up.
If I were to sit here,
Did you want to say something, Hilda? I'm sorry.
My concern is that there's so little talk about resource recovery. We only talk about discharging and getting rid of the nitrogen and phosphorus. And my big concern is that there's so little talk about the resource recovery, be it at the sewer plant facility or in a more local or residential setting.
John,
Okay,
is this for
true enough.
middle? Okay.
Are you going to do that from here?
I can do it from here.
Wherever you want.
I would be perfectly comfortable sitting here and doing it
Go.
if I
Fine.
can.
Good.
I'll just explain how we got to where we are tonight. Several weeks ago, we presented a report on what we've been doing and got feedback from the committee that we should go back and do what Virginia Valiella described as a CRISPR presentation. And last week, a meeting several weeks ago, we talked about what we were going to do, and I agreed that I would put together all the materials in what I believed would be a reasonable presentation in support of a request for a proposal. So I did that. I came back on Monday with the materials to the eco-toilet meeting, and Matt and I talked it through and got input from several people who were there, and we agreed that we thought we were ready to present the proposal with a few changes. So that's what we have today. I'm sorry for the roughness of this, what I put on here, but I'm very new at this job of making PowerPoints. Okay.
Well, the Mrs. Wilson rule gives you a half an hour.
Okay. I will do my best to treat it in less than a half hour if I can.
Don't run it on the dog path.
I'm working from the summary, something called the Eco-Toilet Demonstration Project Documentation in support of the proposed request and so forth. The summary, the 3-page summary. I'm going to be working from that, basically. I may like to refer to the longer document from time to time if people are interested in any specific greater detail. But basically, this is an attempt to present the summary in form. Okay. I won't spend a lot of time on this. We believe that eco-toilets have the potential to reduce nitrogen by 80 to 90%. They can meet the TMDLs together with other alternatives if those alternatives can reduce nitrogen somewhat. They are low cost, energy and water use efficient. They have minimal disruption, they have rapid deployment, job creation, and so forth. There are some problems with them. There's a great deal of skepticism about public acceptability. There's some regulatory hurdles that we may have to go through. They are not a new technology, but they're untried as alternatives to municipal sewers in the U.S. And the demonstration project is designed to meet those, to answer those objections and to try to show that you can demonstrate the positives and overcome the negatives. And if it does that, then we may be able to use them as parts of our plan. So the goal is to establish a basis. The goal of the project is to establish a basis in fact for use of eco-toilets in Falmouth Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. That's what the only real goal we have. But there are 4 objectives to meeting that goal. We first have to get Massachusetts DEP to certify a high nitrogen removal rate. We have to see how high the rate is and see whether they can certify it. We have to try to remove skepticism about public acceptability. We have to provide costs and benefits we have to develop a good account of the costs and benefits that would be used if we did this in a large scale to compare with those of other measures, and we have to overcome legal and regulatory barriers to full implementation. We have to try to show that all that can be done. That's what the demonstration project is trying to do. So what I've been doing for a number of weeks and brought before the committee and has discussed it is what do we have to do in order to do this. And what do we have to accomplish, and what kind of people do we need? This is intended to answer the question, what kind of people do we need, and what do we have to accomplish with those people? We need someone to provide general support of a number of different kinds, and I'll go through that in a minute. We have to have someone to plan and conduct the demonstration project itself, which you'll see in just a minute what that is. We have to have people to conduct publicity, outreach, and education, and we have to have documented costs and benefits, and we have to identify the documents required for regulation. We have to do those four things. They match up directly with the four things that we have to do. For general support, this is just going through the scope of work in detail. For general support, we need support for meetings. We need people to compile and maintain databases. That's extremely important. If you talk with George, he'll say the most important single thing in making viable and believable judgments is maintaining your database. But there's also many other databases we might have to maintain. We have to develop and maintain information bases in addition to the databases, just general information. And there are secretarial and bookkeeping tasks that have to be done. We need someone for general support. We need for the demonstration project itself, we need to conceptualize it and design it. We need to prepare project budget and legal documents. We need liaison with other towns. Now that is something that came up when Andrew Gottlieb was speaking. I think it would be very useful, and I'll ask if Matt could make a couple of comments on this. If we were able to organize with other towns to do some of the project with other towns, because we could reduce considerably the cost of doing it to us, and we could maybe complete it within the framework of the costs we have available. We may not have enough money to do it if we have to do it all ourselves. So we may need some help from other towns. Matt, could you just say a couple of words about that?
Well, there are existing installations of composting toilets all over Cape Cod, and it would be great if we could monitor those, the output of those, and also talk to the owners and find out what their likes and dislikes are about them. Then there's also the opportunity to expand the demonstration project over a number of towns with the help of the county, especially if they can raise money. And also at my organization, I think I mentioned it earlier, we're currently talking to foundations about funding a version of the demonstration project that would go westward towards the South Coast towns and those towns that might be interested there. So I just think the more installations that you have, the more educational opportunities you have, and the more data you'll get from testing. So it will be just more valuable. You also find out how many different variations of installations you'll have and how much those costs will be. So you can get a good concept of how much it's going to cost to install them. So I think, with a little help from the county, we could really extend the program and make it more viable, I think.
It's something we ought to build into the program from the beginning. We also need someone to actually manage the demonstration project. We will eventually need residuals management as the residuals begin to show up. And we also need someone to plan and think ahead about what we're going to do with the residuals, and because there's a lot of things to think about and connect with this. And I think there's reason to, when we may have money for a scientific study of pharmaceuticals attenuation. So that should be built into, it seems to me, the planning for the demonstration project, although it may not start during the next 2 years. Okay? Publicity and outreach, part of the scope of work. We are thinking about a baseline study of attitudes, and if we do that, we have to have someone to design that for us. We need to encourage applicants for the demonstration project. We need people to do that, basically. We need to publicize eco-toilets through a wide variety of ways. as much as possible during the next few years. We need to implement public installations of eco-toilets. We've begun already talking with town officials about possibilities for that, and there are a couple of possibilities. Another part of the scope of work is costs and benefits for comparison with other alternatives. We think that at the very least, we ought to try to calculate, as the demonstration project goes along, to get the information necessary to calculate expected costs per installation and per pound of nitrogen mitigated for a large project. And the same thing, expected benefits in terms of energy, water, jobs, etc., per $1 million of expenditure and ton of nitrogen mitigated. We ought to get those kinds of figures out of the project. We know that there are some regulatory problems. We know that there's some state regulations. The plumbing board has to come into the picture to get certain toilets approved. There may be some problems with building codes, and there are other regulations. We don't know very much about what the regulations are. We may have to prepare an EIS. We don't know. If we do, that'll have to be done. Probably, perhaps not. I don't know. Town health and building code and other regulations in the town have to be dealt with. And at the end of all of that study of what the regulations are, we need to prepare guidelines for the project for full implementation. That's part of the demonstration project, is to find out what the issues are and write the guidelines. Deliverables, this is an incomplete list. It's just a suggestion of what might be the deliverables. And we're putting this, a deliverable of the RFP is not going to be the RFP itself. But we have to do something to get there. So we start out with, we have to submit RFPs or RFQs to acquire the staff. We're going to have to submit a description of the demo project for the CWMP in some detail. And then we're going to have to do a detailed demonstration project plan, which we hope the staff we get will do it. And I've taken some of the slides from Matt to show what the present stage of our thinking on that is. We'll need interim reports, we'll need final demo project report. If we required it, we have an EIR, I suppose, to do. We will eventually hope to have a scientific report on pharmaceuticals and any other deliverables as required. Okay. The demonstration project, this is a preliminary draft demo project plan. It comes from George Heufelter's work. I'd like to make a comment that people seem to think that when you put something on paper, it's set in stone. You can't change. This was something that George Heufelter produced the first time he introduced things to us. And it's a mock-up of what the kind of things you need to do. This is not complete. 62 installations needed by DEP to determine the removal rate and certification. The incentives, we named the $5,000 picture. We don't know for sure whether it will be $5,000. That's just a nice figure. We know that $300 will be needed roughly to pump things out. We need that homes needed to be monitored, and that we have the costs for that. We've talked about the possibility of exemption from future sewer connections as a possible incentive, and there may be qualification for 40% state tax credit. I understand there may be a couple of other incentives we might give people. Criteria for participation. This is just a standard list, which I think will probably stay the same. Whatever we put in, whatever people put into their systems has to be approved by us and by the state, both. Only eco-toilets can be used in the home. Septic tank must be pumped and some sampling brought to grade in order that sampling may be done. Water records have to be made available so that we know how the nitrogen works. The residuals must be removed it should be by a licensed liquid waste hauler. Or later on, when we have a method for doing that, it would be somebody, maybe some private organization doing that for residuals processing. And there must be access to the home or the business for testing. They must agree to that. This was the original proposed preliminary budget of $377,000. This does not include costs of the RFP and the project manager. It does not include those costs. We have not got a good figure on what that should be yet. And but it also includes maybe more eco toilets than we need to install in Falmouth because we might be able to use toilets elsewhere on the Cape. We might be use existing toilets. We might not have to pay as much for in Falmouth itself to do that. We might get help from other people on that. So that's just a vision of what the budget might be. Now this timetable is a little changed after listening to what people said last week about what can be done. Our original proposed timetable seemed a little tight. We hope to acquire staff. We hope that we can get staff earlier than September. In fact, in March, in late March, we hope to have a little bit of help from getting the RFP run from Mike Dominica. We hope to get a draft description for the CWMP with our own efforts, without staff, by April, at least a draft of it. We hope to have the program development completed by September. Originally we said June, that seems too soon. We hope to start the demonstration project even before the program development is absolutely complete. If we have people who want we may be able to do some pump out. We may be able to do some initial starts if we have some people who go forward. We'll start public outreach as soon as we can and continue as long as we must. Plan expansion would start, in other words, planning for the expansion of the project. We should have enough data sometime in 2014 and use that year while the whole committee is working on expansion of the projects. We hope we will be ready to participate in that. And then the implementation after October 2015 if there's money 2015 if there's money available. Now I just wrote down a number of questions which we have not resolved. They're the kinds of questions, some of the kinds of questions which we need to discuss with experts. Some are questions which we simply need to talk about further and resolve before we start the project. How many participants must we have before beginning the demonstration project? That was something that was brought up last time. We think that we should go forward if we have 20 or so. We think if we have 20 or so, and if it looks like we can get more, we think we should go forward if we're ready to do so with that number. But we can talk about that. What precisely should we offer as incentives? We need to talk that through and make sure what we do, and decide on that within the next couple of months. What types of eco-toilets should we test? We need to know more about the toilets. We need to just gather in for more information and talk about that a bit. Which makes of toilets should we refuse to certify for certification, for installation? There may be some we say, no, you can't install those. They won't go with the program. And where may we withdraw participants from? That has to do with the checkerboarding and things like that, in part. And also can we draw participants from other counties? Can we draw participants from other places if other towns will allow us to use them? So that's it.
Good job.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This has come a long way.
Well,
so you've got the most complicated topic of anybody. And you've done
we feel we do, yes.
You do. You've done a lot with it.
Yeah.
Comments or questions from the committee?
Are we voting on this tonight?
Darn right.
No.
No.
Really?
I mean, that's what I saw on the agenda. It affects what comments I make. I mean, if you're voting, I've got a number of criticisms. If we're not voting, I think it was a great job.
I would like to ask. I would like to ask that we vote on one thing, if possible, tonight. That we could go ahead and start discussing this with Mike Dominica.
Well, that doesn't require a vote.
I would like to. Last time you said it, we really weren't far enough along to use his time. I think I would like to say that we would like to start discussing this with Mike Dominica within the next.
Okay, well, I think we decided last time that allocation of his time didn't require a vote, that it would be at the discretion of the chair, and he would try to treat all the committees fairly, and yours is certainly one of them.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the next step is clearly to have some input from Mike, and that's a fair thing to ask for, I guess. Mm-hmm. If it's not the committee's wish to vote on any more than that tonight, we don't have to. It's entirely up to
I mean, for instance,
the body.
There are allusions to things, just to give you an idea of what I'm getting at, like authorization to exempt them from future sewer fees. I mean, that's a reasonable idea that should be considered. For the committee to say officially that they can write up, that they can pay town money to hire somebody to write up papers to legally offer that to somebody would seem to me to require a fairly official level of approval.
I'll answer that by saying that that's something that would have to be worked out and brought back to, the RFP has to be brought back to this committee before it can go to the selectmen, I understand. And therefore, that would be a further stage, it seems to me.
Matt.
That is a question we need to ask.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, and clearly the opportunity is there to do that.
Okay.
And what what our consultant would do would outline how we would go about that.
Or figure out we have to bring back that question.
Hang on a second, Matt. Virginia.
I had several reactions.
Yes.
One is that you have definitely made a lot of progress, and you have brought us sort of the larger picture going all the way out to residual. But the use of the RFP needs to be more focused.
Yes.
And so if a meeting with Mike would help you get there, then I think that's a good use of everybody's time. I sense in here several staffing needs.
Yes.
There's one that sounds more like secretary.
Yes.
Okay, which is not necessarily the subject of an RFP.
That's right.
There's another area, which is probably the larger part, that needs someone with technical background that's
right.
going to work with you
That's right.
on the eco toilets and work on monitoring programs and things like that. And that, to me, is the more appropriate subject for the RFP and your conversation with Mike.
Yes.
Those two things sort of need to be teased out. I read the 3 documents that were posted that we were supposed to read. What you actually put on tonight isn't exactly any one of those documents. It pulls from all of them, at least as far as I can see.
It's mainly this one, but it does pull from the others as well.
Right,
Yeah.
so we didn't actually get the document that was presented tonight. So there are things in these other backup documents that weren't necessarily on the screen tonight, and I'm not exactly sure, what's the actual pieces of paper that you're gonna present to Mike that he's gonna try and craft an RFP. My key point is that things that are more secretarial, documentation, maybe public outreach piece, might be separate from the RFP that is more, has more of a technical background.
Could I answer that just right now before you go into another question?
You might try and separate those before you meet with him.
My intention in presenting this tonight was to present the entire range of things that needed doing,
You did it.
and as far as we know them now.
Right.
And to specify as clearly as possible the different tasks so that someone like Mike or me and Mike and me and Matt sitting together could on the spot say, we need these 2 people. We need 2 types of thing, and let him see what the whole range is, rather than trying to tell him what the range is. We know what the range needs to be. So that was my purpose in doing
It
that.
won't be his job to make the decisions.
No, no.
Okay, he can facilitate and that's why we're having this discussion, and as you know, under the open meeting law, we can't have this discussion sidebar. It's either at one of your subcommittee meetings or it's either tonight.
Exactly.
The other sort of theme that I got through your presentation is you're looking for quite a bit of staffing, so you've got to think about the amount of money
Yes.
that you have, and I think I'm going to say it for practically every project that we need to prioritize what are the most important things, because I think we'll run out of money before we'll run out of ideas. So for instance, the matter of the residuals, to me that's a later phase.
Yes. The residuals are a later phase because nothing is going to happen for the next year or two of that, and we have
Right.
plenty of time to think about that.
Right,
I wanted to get them out on the table.
yep.
And we could go further in the question of prioritizing exactly what has to be done when. That is easy to do.
Good.
And what has to be done first, what has to be done second, what has to be done
Pick the
third.
two things that
Yeah.
you think need to be done this year.
Yeah. And figure out how much we need for those.
Right.
Yeah.
A suggestion was made the other day, which I think is a very good one, that we take some money from each one of the projects, because we're going to need help of various different sorts, which is not RFP money necessarily. Some money from each one of the projects to put together the money necessary to get the help we need to do a number of different things. In other words, if we could provide $15,000 and another one could provide $10,000, we might get it up to $80,000 or $100,000, which would get somebody for us.
Can I just throw, from a townwide perspective, a conversation that dwells extensively on manpower needs is not going to play well in every quarter. I mean, we've got a school system that's laying teachers off. We have lots of pressing municipal needs for existing activities that people think are important to their lives already. And the more you start talking about needing a person for this and a person for that, it may play well in your committee, but it's not going to play well much further than that.
I wouldn't even qualify it that way. That's one of the reasons I set all these things out is in all the different tasks to be done. It seems to me that one way of doing it would be get an RFP for those things we need to do that require technical expertise, and to use that as a way of, they could provide, if we got the right person or the right group, they could provide, they could hire someone to do some of the other work for us. In other words, it could be folded into an RFP that they would be required to provide certain services for us, for the committee.
That will run up your costs.
It will run up the costs, that's right.
That will need to be something
Yes.
that Mike is, gets the message very clear.
Right.
The more open-ended it is, and then the larger the number of services you want, and the less defined those
Yes.
services are, the larger the dollar amount will be.
I see where you're going. So what you want us to do is to prioritize.
And be concrete.
And be
Be
concrete.
very
Okay,
specific.
That's fine.
Very specific.
Yeah, one thing that I have seen in here is a number of issues you have presented as issues. And at this stage in the proceeding, we're looking for issues to have been settled, choices to have been made by the subcommittee on a number of these issues, and not just left out there for future discussion. You got to narrow these things down. When you have a field of choices, your job is to narrow them down. And I think you need to do a little more of that, to be candid. Jerry.
One of the things that might help across all the committees, we heard Andrew say, and everybody talked about the opt-out. Well, the opt-out is something that's going to have to be looked at in the bigger picture. We either get the opt-out by special home rule petition, or we get the opt-out by going to Section 10 of the O'Leary bill. That's not something each committee has to agonize over. That's something we can have Nate write a brief paragraph in, because it could be applicable to a number of probably most of the demo projects. So I mean, that's the type of thing we're saying. Good issue, but we'll discuss it in a bigger picture.
What do you mean by the opt-out?
If you do something, you don't
have to join the sewer.
And the exemption from the sewer fee.
Right.
But they have a catch-22 problem, because they want to use that as an incentive to get people to volunteer for the demo project.
Well,
And I submit that falls in the category what Eric was talking about as an issue that the subcommittee has to solve.
They can't solve it.
I was going to say, incidentally, that's the kind of issue which we cannot solve without discussion with lawyers, with other people. We can't solve that. We can't decide that alone.
Steve.
If I can jump in here. This is a very complete picture, and for this committee to take a vote, it would be much more helpful if you say, we want to do this, and we need a vote for it. I would contend the biggest challenge you have in front of you right now is identifying the 62 homes. And my thought process is that people that get involved in real estate arrangements or development arrangements oftentimes go out to a large group of people or whatnot and wind up signing things that are referred to as rights of first refusal. So I would suggest that the first task that I'd be more than willing to support is a program for you to find and identify as many of those 62 homes as you can, defining what what you're going to want to do once they're all ready to go, and then when you got the critical mass number, I don't know if it's 62 or 15 or 20, you've got these folks signed up through this first proposal that will all back up to go find those people. Then you come back and say, and we've looked at their properties, we've looked at their houses, this is what it's going to cost to hook them up, this is how we're going to run the sampling systems, and it's going to cost this much. And then that's the second vote. So I think we need to have the locations. I think there's some work to get the locations. I mean, you came up with a great idea tonight, which is maybe there's already some other places you can put on the list. The other comment I have is, in an earlier conversation, it might have been one of your subcommittees because I attended at least 2 of them along the way, this question about pharmaceuticals, which is a hot button for a lot of people, myself included in the environment, everything else, seems to be so far off track of nitrogen issues that I'm wondering why you're even folded in here right now and spending money. I think it's beyond the scope of what we have money appropriated to do, and I don't know that we can, as a board, vote on spending money chasing down pharmaceuticals. I just don't.
I'm not going to try to answer both of those in detail right now, but I would say your first one I think is backwards. I think it's going at it the wrong way around. The second one, I think we can find money for. There are people out there who are going to insist that it be done if we're going to eventually, and it's something we can find money for doing. And we don't have to know, it can be a part of the thing which down the line will help us a great deal. It's going to take years to do, and that's the reason I think we ought to
If
start.
it's somebody else's money, I don't think
somebody
Steve's
else's money.
objection would be
No, I don't
as...
think we can spend any of the money we have.
No, I don't.
Exactly.
I don't think we
Fine.
intend to.
Okay, well, that's easy. Matt?
Couple of things. Clearly, it's a very involved project, and to expect us to do this on our own time, to go out and actually recruit people for participation is, frankly, I don't know if that's possible.
I don't think I said that.
Yes, you did.
Well,
No, I said I think that you should come back with some type of hard proposal saying, we want to, this is our proposal for how we're going to find these people. I mean, I don't, that may be who,
Well,
you may be saying you want to hire.
okay. Forgive me. I think I had the floor. I want to you take enough time to get your message out. Let me
Sorry.
talk a little bit too.
Sorry.
It is a very involved project. We're trying to come up with ways to do it. It's just, you can't expect the committee of 2 people to go out there and to do publicity and to do advertising and to recruit people and then to go into their homes and figure out how much it's going to cost to put these things in, if it's possible. There's just a lot to this. So we town meeting gave us $500,000 for this demonstration project. And you can say, well, it's up to the selectmen, and generally it is. But that's our budget. We came up with a budget of $377,000 approximately. That's with County Board of Health doing the testing and the installations, and not the installations, but actually doing the pre-installation check of the homes to make sure they're possible participants. And we'd still have quite a bit of money left over to hire somebody to manage the program, to manage the project. And I think that's what we need to do, really. Maybe we're not quite there yet. Maybe this needs to be honed down a little bit, but please don't expect us to be the program managers and the program educators and the outreach coordinators, because it's beyond our scope.
The manpower piece, we have an interesting development on, which will come later in the program here. But I can see already tonight, we're not ready to adopt, the committee the subcommittee isn't ready to say it's the final product, and the committee isn't ready to say we're adopting it and turning it over to Mike. But it might be worth a conversation with Mike. Would that make sense to you at this point? You've gotten the gist of where we are on this. You think okay. Why don't we say, if the committee's happy with that, why don't we say we'll do that, so that the thing can get focused a little even more and be back. Fair enough?
Yep.
Is that a motion? Can I get from somebody?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay, additional comment.
Oh, all right.
I need clarification of that. So the motion was that the subcommittee will speak with
Mike Domenica.
We will arrange for a meeting with him and them, to the chairman and the other member, if he's available, to work on this.
To start the process of
Right.
doing what we have to do to get an RFP,
Exactly.
what we get an RFP for,
Exactly.
whatever it is.
I don't think you've made it easier for it.
No, you're right. That wasn't that helpful.
I agree to the motion. I would think in your discussion with Mike that you have a clue as to the more technical things that would go into an RFP in your footnote from George Hoyfelter. These were the parts that he, a technical person, thought was important and could do as a potential vendor. So that, I think, is that discussion. The other thing that the subcommittee needs to do is a job description. You're talking about a project manager.
Okay.
You need to describe what this project manager would do. Are you talking about half-time or full-time? So that you clearly have a feeling that lots of things need to be done, but it's got to be more, crystallized. It's got to be more concise, and a job description will do that.
Yeah.
What was the first point that you made there?
That the technical request for proposals, RFP, that they're going to discuss with Mike, be focused on parts 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. These were tasks that were in a document that was sent to us.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor and it's been seconded. Any further comment or discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Yes, this has come a long way.
It has.
Steve Layton.
All right, I think I can make this brief.
The premise here that this is a draft RFP for the Oyster Pond CWMP and that we would vote on it tonight.
Yes, it's been posted. You all have copies of it. It's really essentially the same as the PowerPoint that I presented at the last meeting, just with my attempt to make it look a little bit more like what I assume RFPs are supposed to look like. And I'm open to any comments or how to fix it up. But basically, I think the next step is for me to meet with Mike Domenica to make it really look like an RFP.
Okay, and that requires a vote that this committee accepts it and moves it on to that level.
Right.
Okay, so is there a motion along those lines?
Were there any suggestions for improving?
Hang on just a minute while we review it.
It could come back significantly improved after you talk to Mike.
Right.
I hope so.
No, it could
That's
be,
what he
you know,
can
it's, I mean, it looks pretty good. There's 2 or 3 things I can take shots at, but why bother right now?
Right.
We both get an early meeting wanting to.
That's right, 10:20 at night, we're not going to take shots at anything.
Okay, I'll move that this draft RFP being, that Steve Layton meet with Mike Domenica to work on this draft RFP for Oyster Pond.
Yeah, we're looking for it to be approved by the committee for drafting by this consultant, which I guess is the motion.
Yes, that's my.
So the motion was that Steve will work with Mike on drafting the RFP.
Motion is that the committee approves the draft
Okay.
RFP for Oyster Pond and that it be forwarded to Mike DeBenica for development.
There's a second on that?
Can I second?
Of course.
I'll second.
Yeah, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote. We're good. We're down to correspondence here. We have a few things that have been handed around. One of them is a memo from Heather Harper describing her first crack at a job description for the assistant that we have been talking about the town providing. Did everyone get a copy of that?
I don't think I,
This is the technical liaison?
Draft scope of
Oh,
work,
okay.
part-time temporary independent contractor. We're handing it around for the purpose of anybody who has any comments or suggestions, email them to me, and we'll incorporate those into what we forward to Heather. She's just looking for comment. I don't think we have to make all the comments tonight, but forward them to me during the course of the week if you have any.
I think the point to be made here is that we're looking at somebody who will be secretarial-like, but also able to do grant writing and technical review, gather technical information, and that they were contemplating 15 hours a week. At least that's what's contemplated at the moment. Am I reading that right? Average of 15 hours down at the bottom.
Yep, yep.
Where was
salary,
money from?
$30 for an average of 50?
$30 an hour.
$30 an hour.
Yeah.
Yes, good point. It's not $2 an hour, that would violate minimum wage. $30 per hour.
One of the things to think about while you're looking at this is, the sooner the chair can get something back to Heather, the sooner we can put the concept in front of the selectmen, and the sooner we can advertise. So if it has to wait for 2 weeks because you want to finally approve the details of this, you know, that could delay. But if you want to do it, fine, as opposed to giving comments to Matt, he'll bring them up with Heather. You know, I don't have really too many comments on this. I do think, Virginia, that it's more of a technical person than a secretarial person. Yes, posting on the website and things like that, and some of the outreach, but I would not, you know, $30 an hour classify it.
Good point.
Good point. Yeah.
More the technical side.
Yeah. Steve?
I think it's great. I assume that this person would also be the one who mans the telephone number that's mentioned in the notice that goes in the water bills, if we do that?
That's something to consider.
I mean, you got to be honest with them when you're interviewing them, that might be part of the job.
Yes.
How many hours do you have? She's going to be a
Well,
contractor.
they can have an answering machine. They don't have to answer it.
Put that in your emails.
Okay.
And, okay, again, there's no vote needed on this because we voted some time ago to request it. All it is information for the committee. Comments, forward them to me and I will get them to Heather. And if we get this before the selectmen on the 26th, we would have to pretty much have our ducks in a row by the 20th. So we're not meeting again. And I want to get it in there the 26th. So get the comments in within a week. Would that be a reasonable request?
Yeah. Just to clarify, this is a person that would work for the committee for all of this.
Well, it would be under Jerry's department, and presumably he would share this person with us.
No, I think under Mike, because you need a report to a full-time person.
Right.
But the committee is largely given the person direction.
Right.
Great.
That's
And the money's coming from the bond issue.
right.
The money's coming from the 2.7.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Right. Any other comments or questions on that one?
I might make the suggestion that you ask every one of the committee members to either send you an email saying they have no comments, or to send you the comments, and that
Good.
way you will know
Good-
when
good
you have a
point.
pile of emails saying no comments, everything's clear.
Good point. Okay.
So you don't anticipate any, you think you'll just be getting minor things, and so you can just go ahead with it? So we won't have to delay?
The premise is not to delay. Minor or major, we'll pass them along to Heather and work it out. But I do think it's worth getting to the selectmen in that time frame. So other comments or observations or questions on that? Good. We have something from Steve, a letter.
Similar sort of category last
And then-
meeting.
And I also have something.
We,
Yours are around here.
we mentioned that we would get a letter drafted to go to the selectmen. Ron Zweig did that before he went off. And that's been circulated to everybody that participated in that committee as well as these members. And so, similar arrangement, I guess, if there's something in that that you think is critically important, again, try to keep it as simple as possible. A couple of bags, roll the oysters, get rid of them, not try to do anything beyond that. And to the extent that this is going to go to the Board of Selectmen, I will, through Chuck Martinson or whatever, give a heads-up call to Jerry Moles about what we're doing so that he doesn't come as a surprise from the selectmen.
Okay, does that need a vote or what? Is it?
No, I think it's in the same category of if people have comments, get them to me and I'll edit them up real quick, but I think I'd like to be on piggyback on your schedule.
Absolutely.
If I can forget to the selectmen.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because we already voted
We already
that
voted.
a letter would be sent.
Right.
Done, but I thought it'd be
think it's a
courtesy
good
to
letter.
bring the letter back and say what we had.
By the 20th.
Okay. Under correspondence, we're going to talk about the BU Marine study.
Ron Zweig and then Jerry asked for the actual copy of the study that the Boston Marine Program did. It was in 2005. Ron asked for a link, but there isn't a link. So I have brought hard copy, and Jerry, I'm hoping that you will scan it and then be able to post it.
I can scan it and distribute it.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
I'll post it up on
Okay.
I lost my posting skills intentionally.
Didn't know you had any.
Amy can only do so much.
All right, final point, and this is a good one, the workshop that we've talked about with the GHD. Is he still here? No.
I think, yeah, leave.
He did.
An appointment? In any event, the workshop is scheduled for the first Friday in April. The site has been changed, I gather. The library wasn't going to be available long enough, so we're talking about the recreation building now. Is that right? Okay.
It's a big room.
Right.
We can get, I guess a committee is going to either try to get FCTV, and depending on the audio needs, we can have IT departments set up, projectors and things like that. The other thing that's unfortunate, it's falling on Good Friday. I don't think it intended to offend anybody, but it's just the way it happened. And, I don't think Nick was available to try to change it to the Saturday to try to get the library,
Right.
It's a good to go for Friday unless the committee delays it, and I don't know when we can get it.
Yeah, I think a workshop is not the same. I mean, if we were having some huge public function, you might be more concerned about it falling on a Good Friday. It's a workshop. For most of the world, it's a work day.
My understanding is that the format for this was discussion amongst the committee with GHD representatives and DEP and EPA regulators. The public is free to listen, but it's a discussion amongst those people.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and then because it's filmed, I think we've definitely covered our bases.
Yeah, the purpose is to dig our teeth into the writing of a CWMP, because we've had a lot on our plate, but that is the biggest thing on our plate, and we've kind of neglected it for the last couple of months as these other projects have moved along, and that's okay. But we got to get back to the CWMP, and we have to do it in an organized way. So I'm hoping that the next meeting of ours on the 29th can be largely devoted to that purpose, so that when we go to the meeting on Friday, we will have gotten ourselves up to speed again on what we'd like to have in the CWMP and how we can get it there. Mike, any observations or comments on all this?
I have a lot of observations that can wait, comments as well. I do have one question and then another comment related to a little bit different topic. Number one, as I understand it right now, there's votes to proceed with the echo toilet, composting toilet, urine diverting toilet, RFP, the oyster pond, and the shellfish, was that voted on yet to proceed? Okay.
Okay, the eco toilet was not voted to proceed, it was voted to have a
conversation.
to work with you to get it to the point where it could proceed.
And I think they're all in that same
Right.
category. The other thing is, if I could get Mr. Monroe and Mr. Layton to send me their documents, which I'm sure you would do in preparation.
The documents. Send the documents.
You want them sent to you rather than given to you?
No, that hard copy's fine.
You can have them right now.
That's great. And
You
I'll
can
go
have
ahead,
mine.
we can set up time for that.
Careful, you're
The other
tied
thing
down.
is,
You're tethered there, but.
Real quickly,
Right.
For our discussion at the last meeting, I did prepare a questionnaire for the committee, subcommittee leads. Some of the information here you covered in your presentation, needs to be tweaked a little bit. But there's a lot of other information here that needs to be considered for a full RFP.
Yes.
In preparation for our meeting, if you could go through this and fill it out, as you suggested last meeting, Steve, fill it out to the best of your ability, then we can fill the gaps when we get together. And
I'm
then
waiting
it
for
goes
that.
right
Yeah.
into it.
Great.
Yeah, so I have it 90% done. I can get it to Eric tomorrow electronically, and he can transmit it to.
Actually, our transmitter is the vice chairman.
Okay, very good.
Great.
Whatever I agree to, yes.
Right, any further matters to come up before the committee? Matt?
Just one more reminder, we're going to have that conference or little workshop with Dr. Nick Ashbolt Saturday morning, 10 o'clock at the library. He's the EPA guy, microbiologist, specialist in eco-toilets. So
Very good.
please try to make it.
Very good.
One last item, I believe we need to table the review of the last meeting minutes until Carol's here for the next meeting.
Good point.
Okay, so I just suggest we had meeting minutes from last meeting.
So we couldn't adopt
But
them
we
because
should, we normally adopt them each meeting, but we should probably table it till the next meeting.
Okay, that sounds like a motion to table the minutes from the last meeting till the next meeting. Second on that?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I got that. Any further business to come before the committee?
I want to announce something. It won't take long. I'm going to be near Sweden in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea, from the 5th to the 9th of May, and I will be in Berlin and the week before that. I'll be away for 3 weeks altogether in late April, early May, on our 50th wedding anniversary trip. Wow. The reason I'm announcing this, if anyone has any information about eco-toilet, anything that they want me to look at while I'm in Berlin, I'd like to take a whole day and look at things they have in Berlin. I'd like to take a whole day in Sweden, if it's possible.
If you do that, you may not get to 51.
No, my wife has already agreed to it. She's already agreed to it. We're being 3 weeks. She has plenty to do. She has brothers and sisters to talk
Well, I
about.
talked to Brett Stumkey, because I think he has some relatives over there and has visited some of the same places and has.
Yeah. I just want to know something near at hand. I can get to Sweden in an hour from where I am and spend a day there and come back. And I'd like to know whether there's something I can look at there that would be useful to us. So, if anybody has any information about that, tell them.
Okay. Thank you. Any further announcements or otherwise to come before the committee? If not, I think, did we move to adjourn already?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for coming tonight.
Your homework.